Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case, the case of Doreen Erbert. Doreen Erbert was born on November 29, 1952, in California. She grew up in a very large family of 5 children. Her kindness and desire to help others defined her as a person. After college, she moved to San Francisco, where she worked as a physiotherapist. Doreen also nurtured a dream of creating her own large family. This aspiration became a reality when she met Michael Dennis, who worked near her clinic. They began dating, got married, and in 1976, their son Paul was born. Initially, Michael and Doreen were happy, but the birth of their child marked the beginning of their marital troubles. A year later, they decided to go their separate ways, with their son staying with Doreen and Michael receiving regular visitation rights. Doreen and her family were still able to maintain a fairly stable life despite the many hardships they faced. She met Charles, and they started dating, eventually getting married and settling in a quiet neighborhood in San Jose. They was thrilled when their daughter Diana was born in 1979. Charles was eager to be a father and was delighted to welcome Diana, raising her alongside Doreen's son from a previous relationship. Tragedy struck in February 1980 when disaster befell their young family. 4-year-old Paul slipped through the fence surrounding their backyard pool and fell into the water. Doreen, who was at home at the time, discovered what had happened too late. She immediately pulled Paul from the water and called for emergency services. Paul was rushed to the hospital and connected to life support, but after 10 agonizing days, the medical team concluded that he had no chance of recovery. The heartbreaking decision was made to disconnect Paul from life support. Doreen was heartbroken and consumed by guilt, despite the police investigation clearing her of any blame. However, with the help of her young daughter, she slowly began to heal. For years after the traumatic event, the family finally received some good news. After 2 previous miscarriages, Doreen became pregnant again, and this time, everything seemed to be going smoothly. They was expecting a baby boy, due to arrive in early November. Just days before Doreen's scheduled hospital visit, the family decided to participate in Halloween festivities. On the evening of October 31st, the neighborhood was filled with decorated homes, children trick-or-treating, and parents handing out candy. Diana, now 4 years old, was excited to join in and her parents agreed. Although Doreen was 9 months pregnant, she accompanied her daughter on the trick-or-treating adventure, while Charles stayed home to hand out candy to other children. Charles and his wife, Doreen, had returned home from taking their daughter trick-or-treating. Just before 9 p.m., noticing they were running low on candy, Charles decided to make a quick trip to the nearby store to restock. At around 8:50 p.m., he left the house, leaving his wife and daughter behind. 15 minutes later, he returned home to find the front door slightly ajar, which seemed suspicious. As he entered the house, he was met with a horrific scene. His wife, Doreen, lay on the floor in the corridor, surrounded by a large amount of blood and showed no signs of life. Charles immediately called 911. In the living room, he then found the body of their unborn child. Charles was in shock, struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. At first he wondered if Doreen had had a miscarriage, but he quickly realized that something much more serious had happened. Next to their unborn child lay Doreen's severed hand, making it clear to Charles that his family had been attacked. Fearing for his daughter's safety, he frantically searched for her. There was so much blood on the floor that he slipped and fell while running through the house. Eventually, he found his daughter hiding behind the sofa in the living room. She is still alive and unhurt. When paramedics arrived, they found Doreen's weak pulse and rushed her to the hospital. Tragically, Doreen did not survive and was pronounced dead in the ambulance. Her unborn child also did not survive. The attacker had inflicted severe injuries on the baby after removing it from Doreen's womb. A post-mortem examination revealed that Doreen had been stabbed multiple times with a long, sharp object, possibly a sword or machete. The crime scene was particularly disturbing, with blood covering the floors, walls, and ceiling. Police officers at the scene were deeply affected by what they witnessed. Despite a thorough search of the house, no signs of the perpetrator or any evidence were found. However, investigators did discover bloody footprints leading from the house to the middle of the road, suggesting that the killer may have escaped in a vehicle. Soon, investigators found another crucial piece of evidence on the lawn in front of the house, a wolf mask covered in blood. They believed it might belong to the killer, as Charles reported they didn't own such a mask. The evidence was sent to the laboratory for analysis. And police attempted to question Diana, who was the only witness in this incident. Although shaken and in complete shock, Diana provided valuable details about what happened. She explained that shortly after her father left for the store, someone knocked on their door. When Doreen answered, she saw a man wearing a wolf mask and holding a long blade. He threatened to kill her, and Doreen immediately screamed at Diana to run out of the house. Diana hid behind the sofa but couldn't recall what happened next until her father found her. Initially, the police found it suspicious that the victim's husband, Charles, had left for the store just minutes before the killer arrived. This coincidence led investigators to consider him as a potential suspect. When Charles returned home, he unknowingly stepped on blood multiple times, even falling and getting covered in it. Despite this, Diana was unable to help identify the attacker due to the wolf mask. Police initially considered the possibility that Charles might have intentionally gotten blood on his clothes to create an alibi. However, detectives quickly discovered several inconsistencies in this theory. Firstly, Charles's shoes did not match the bloody footprints found on the street. Secondly, the killer likely escaped in a car parked in front of the house, but no blood was found in Charles's vehicle, nor was a different pair of shoes discovered. To investigate further, police went to the store that Charles had visited that evening and spoke to the staff there. They confirmed that Charles had indeed purchased candy from him. This established an alibi for Charles, as he didn't have enough time to commit the murder. Surveillance footage from the store supported Charles's account, leading detectives to temporarily rule him out as the prime suspect. They then asked Charles if he knew of anyone who might want to harm his family. Charles immediately pointed out Michael, Doreen's ex-husband. According to Charles, Michael's behavior changed dramatically after the death of their son, who had drowned in the pool. Michael blamed Doreen for the boy's death, believing she had deliberately killed Paul to cut ties with him. Michael filed a lawsuit against his ex-wife Doreen, holding her responsible for the death of Paul, but lost the case. Their marriage had been troubled even before their divorce. After the birth of their son, Michael's behavior became increasingly erratic, often withdrawing into depression and distancing himself from his family. Doreen suspected that Michael's childhood traumas were to blame. As a child, Michael had hearing problems and wore a bulky hearing aid, which earned him constant teasing from his peers. This led to him growing up as an introvert with few friends and a fear of interacting with women. Although his relationship with Doreen seemed to have helped him overcome these issues, they eventually resurfaced and contributed to their decision to divorce. When Doreen married Charles, Michael began to resent her, particularly for the fact that another man was raising his son. These feelings became even worse after Paul's death, made Michael hate his ex-wife even more. Michael has also been unemployed for a long time, which had a significant impact on him. After considering this information, the detectives decided to visit Michael's house to speak with him. Although Charles's statement alone was not enough to make Michael the main suspect, the fact that Michael lived only 2 miles from Doreen's house prompted the detectives to pay him a visit immediately. The officers arrived at Michael's home around midnight and noticed a pickup truck parked near the garage. When police shined their flashlights on Michael's car, they saw blood on the steering wheel and keys. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. Lights were still on inside the house and they could hear running water, leading them to suspect that Michael might be destroying evidence or washing bloody clothes. They continued knocking until Michael opened the door. Michael remained calm, even after being informed Doreen's murder. Michael answered the officers' questions calmly and allowed them to enter his house without a warrant. He claimed that he had gone to the store earlier that day, returned home, and hadn't left since. He even agreed to sign a form allowing the police to search his home. However, as he reached for the pen to sign, officers noticed a deep cut on his right hand. Michael explained that he had accidentally cut himself while carving a pumpkin for Halloween, but the police were skeptical of his story. The wound was fresh, with blood still seeping out. As officers searched the house, Michael accompanied one of them upstairs to retrieve his ID. However, when Michael reached for the bed headboard, the officer intervened, sensing suspicious behavior. Why would Michael store his documents behind the bed? Curiosity led the police to conduct a deeper investigation. Upon approaching the bed, they spotted a holster attached to the headboard, containing a loaded gun. The officer confiscated the weapon and escorted Michael downstairs to the other officers. Meanwhile, the officers discovered a trail of blood droplets leading from the house to the garage. And they found a washing machine and a pile of clothes with bloodstains. This evidence is enough to arrest Michael. A thorough search of the house by detectives and forensic experts followed, seeking evidence that might link Michael to the murder. Although the blood analysis would take a few days, the police made some disturbing discoveries. They found an empty box for an 18-inch machete. Medical experts confirmed that the wounds from this knife matched the actual wounds found on Doreen's body. During the investigation, police found 2 makeshift coffins in Michael's house, leading them to believe that he was planning to harm his ex-wife, Doreen, and her husband. The presence of medical body bags at his home was also suspicious. As detectives pieced together the evidence, they went to a judge to request a warrant for Michael's arrest. However, due to a lack of concrete evidence, they were initially only able to hold him for a limited time. When the judge refused to issue an arrest warrant, citing insufficient circumstantial evidence to convict Michael, he was released from prison. But detectives eventually got vital information from the autopsy results. Experts discovered that the crime scene had blood from 2 individuals. One blood type was identified as Doreen's, and the other was Michael's. This evidence suggested that Michael had likely injured himself while attacking Doreen. With this new evidence, the judge quickly issued a warrant for Michael's arrest, charged him with the murder of Doreen and her unborn child. In addition, detectives discovered that Michael owned a wolf mask identical to the one found near Doreen's house the previous Halloween. Further inquiry revealed that Michael had worn the mask to a party, and a photograph of him wearing it was even obtained by police. To validate this, detectives searched Michael's home and found the same clothing he wore in the photo. To search for new clues to the case, the police interviewed Doreen's neighbors about the incidents that happened that night. Several children who were trick-or-treating reported seeing a man wearing a wolf mask standing across from Doreen's house, eyeing it intensely. This sighting occurred around 7 p.m., a full 2 hours before the murder. Michael's trial commenced in July 1988, 4 years after the crime. He initially pleaded guilty but later changed his plea to not guilty by reason of insanity. A psychologist evaluated Michael and diagnosed him with severe mental health issues. Michael claimed that the horror of Halloween was too much to bear, as the sight of children trick-or-treating reminded him of his own loss and triggered a mental breakdown. He alleged that this breakdown led him to visit Doreen's house armed with a machete on the evening of the murder. When Doreen opened the door, Michael revealed his true identity as the man behind the mask and made a shocking statement: "She killed their son." Recognizing the man as Michael, Doreen quickly screamed for her daughter to run and Michael immediately attacked her. Michael claimed he was unaware that Doreen was pregnant at the time of the attack, but this assertion was met with skepticism. Doreen was visibly pregnant, standing at 4 feet 1 inches tall, and her friends found it hard to believe that Michael wouldn't have noticed, especially given her prominent belly. In fact, her friends joked that her pregnancy had made her almost as wide as she was tall. The prosecution argued that Michael was fully aware of his actions and had planned the crime in advance, a claim supported by evidence from the investigation. Detectives discovered that Michael had previously shared his desire to kill his ex-wife and her husband with friends, and had even discussed disposing of their bodies in the bay. The presence of 2 coffins and body bags in his home suggested that he was serious about carrying out this plan, and the prosecution argued that he had adjusted his intentions for some reason to target Doreen instead. Michael may have panicked or feared being caught, prompting him to leave the house quickly. During the trial, Doreen's 9-year-old daughter, Diana, testified about what she witnessed. Charles had wanted to spare his daughter the traumatic experience, but she was the only witness to the crime. The trial lasted a year, ultimately resulting in Michael's conviction for the murders of Doreen and her unborn child. Michael was sentenced to death, but a moratorium on the death penalty in California delayed his execution. As a result, Michael remains in prison, and his sentence will be carried out. Years later, Diana revealed that the murder had such a profound effect on her, and she could never forget the horror she witnessed. Ultimately, Diana decides to forgive Michael and try to move past the past to focus on the future. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shanynthia Gardner. Shanynthia Gardner was born in Memphis, Tennessee, in the late 1980s. Shanynthia's childhood was relatively ordinary. She was a beautiful, slender, curly-haired brunette with a talent for music and a creative spirit. She had a gift for composing songs and singing, which earned her local recognition and fame. Her love for music was just one of her passions. In addition to singing, Shanynthia enjoyed fashion and photography. She was a natural in front of the camera and had an artistic eye for capturing everyday moments. Despite her many creative pursuits, Shanynthia was also devoted to charity and her faith. She regularly attended church and prioritized her family's needs. Her life seemed to be on a promising path, filled with potential and possibilities. Shanynthia was 14 years old when she met Dur Clayton through mutual friends. They quickly discovered common interests and became friends. As they grew older and graduated from high school, their friendship evolved into a romantic relationship. They were perceived as a serious and stable young couple, but had some minor run-ins with the law, including traffic violations and disorderly conduct. In 2008, Dur faced a serious accusation of assaulting a woman, although it was allegedly unintentional. Fortunately for him, the charges were eventually dropped. That same year, Shanynthia and Dur began living together, and they had a son. Shanynthia took on a caring motherly role not only to their son but also to Dur's 2 children from a previous relationship. Sonia Clayton, Dur's mother, considered Shanynthia a part of their family, not just she her son loved. Shanynthia's devotion to her children made her special in Sonia's eyes. Although the relationship between Shanynthia and Dur was short-lived, they maintained some contact after the breakup. In Sonia's opinion, Shanynthia remained a good partner and caring mother to Dur. Shanynthia's marriage to Martin Gardner marked a new chapter in her life. He brought joy and stability, and she won him over with her kindness and love for children. To Martin, Shanynthia embodied feminine tenderness and wisdom. Shanynthia and Martin's life together progressed quickly. In September 2013, they moved into an apartment in southeast Shelby County and started their life together. After their wedding, they welcomed their first child, Telone. The following year, Saya was born, and soon after, 2 more girls, Savi and Yazzie, joined the family. In total, Martin and Shanynthia had 4 children together, in addition to Shaninthia's child from a previous relationship. For the young mom, her children were always the top priority. She enjoyed her part-time work at the Children's Hospital and was also actively involved in a center that raised funds to support children in need. Helping others was her true calling, and she dedicated her life to it with gratitude. Friday, July 1st, 2016, began like any other ordinary day. At around noon, Shanynthia was speaking with her husband, Martin, over the phone. Her voice remained calm, as it typically was. She told her husband she was going to watch a movie with the kids, giving no indication that anything was amiss on this ordinary day. However, during a quiet conversation between the spouses, a sudden and inexplicable madness took hold of Shanynthia. She grabbed a kitchen knife and entered the living room, where she attacked her 6-month-old daughter, Yazzie. The defenseless baby was caught off guard and her life was brutally cut short by the person she trusted most. The eldest child, at just 7 years old, witnessed this horrific scene unfold before his eyes, unable to fully comprehend the tragedy. Panicked and desperate, he fled the house. Shanynthia pursued him, still armed with the knife, intent on continuing her rampage. She chased after Dur, but his terrified screams caught the attention of the neighbors. A couple of neighbors rushed outside after hearing screams and were met with a horrific scene that would haunt them. Shanynthia stopped attacking Dur when she realized she was being watched. However, the horror was far from over. Chania went back inside the house, where her children, Savi and Talon, were waiting. In a state of distress, she went upstairs to the bedroom where the younger children were, marking the end of their innocent lives. The witnesses quickly called emergency services, requesting help for Dur and his siblings. At that moment, no one could have predicted the tragic outcome that awaited the quiet neighborhood. When the sheriff's personnel arrived, they were confronted with a gruesome scene. Inside the house, they found 4 lifeless children, covered in blood. The sight was shocking. Shanynthia calmly called her husband, Martin, and confessed to killing their children. The house was now filled with blood and horror. The investigators had obtained a bloody knife. Chaplains and specialists were called in to provide support to Dur, who had endured unimaginable trauma and required immediate attention. The sheriff's department launched a major operation, cordoning off the apartment complex, including the golf area and country club. Shanynthia was taken into custody without bail, and her trial was swiftly scheduled for July 5th. Despite the heinous nature of her crimes, Shanynthia was still a mother and partner, someone who had once nurtured love, care, and joy. A friend of Shanynthia, Michelle Jaiman, actively defended Shanynthia on social media, countering the unjust accusations and emphasizing a key factor: postpartum depression. The case sparked discussions, with Dr. Joel Rissman, a psychiatrist at the University of Tennessee Medical Center, noting that mothers killing their children is rare and often linked to mental health problems. Dr. Rissman also highlighted the state's insufficient mental health funding, which frequently leaves families without vital support. Dr. Diane Barnes, a specialist in psychology and postpartum health, clarified the distinction between postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. She emphasized that these are 2 separate conditions with distinct symptoms. Although the exact nature of Shaninthia's condition required further examination, Dr. Barnes expressed skepticism that a woman experiencing postpartum depression would commit such acts, instead suggesting psychosis as a more plausible explanation. Dur's father did not believe Shanynthia was guilty. Although he was not his son's guardian, he was able to visit him after his relationship with Shanynthia ended, but this stopped in November 2014. He noticed Shanynthia becoming more radical and controlling. His attempts to contact his son were unsuccessful, and he was excluded from his life. Those close to Shanynthia noticed a significant change in her. She began experiencing discomfort, which turned into anxiety, paranoia, and panic attacks. Her behavior became unpredictable, and some suspected postpartum depression. This was a shock, as Shanynthia was seen as strong and dependable. She had always been in control, but now seemed to be struggling. Shaninthia's sudden change in behavior in March 2015 left many people baffled. At first, her friends and family couldn't understand what was happening. One day, she left work early, picked up her children, and drove them down an unfamiliar road, away from their home. Her husband, Martin, thought she was just going for a walk in a park, which was a normal part of her daily routine, so he wasn't immediately concerned. However, as the hours went by, Shanynthia never came home, which worried Martin greatly. He decided to alert the authorities to look out for his wife, who was driving with their 5 children. Shanynthia drove over 74 miles east, from Memphis to Corinth, but it's unclear why she chose that destination, as she didn't know anyone there. She was later found in the emergency room of St. Francis Hospital, but the police didn't explain how she ended up there. Shanynthia had superficial cuts on her neck and one wrist. If she had attempted to harm herself, her children were the only witnesses, but they were too young to understand what was happening. Eventually, the authorities brought Shanynthia home. However, her behavior became even more unusual after that. She told Martin that someone was threatening her and their family, which shocked him, as she provided no details about the supposed threat or who was behind it. There had been no previous incidents of this kind. When Shanynthia was with family and friends, she began complaining about her job and workload, claiming it made her feel terrible. She soon started saying that some co-workers wanted to harm her. Despite these strange claims, Shanynthia showed no signs of being violent or abusive towards her children or others. The investigation into Shanynthia Gardner's case proved to be a challenging process. Craig Morton, her defense attorney, opted not to discuss the case with the media in its initial stages, deeming it premature for such comments. During the court hearing on July 5, 2016, Shanynthia remained silent, appearing via video link. Despite being questioned by Judge Lambert, she refrained from speaking. Following the trial, Shanynthia was transferred to the Mental Health Institute. Her relatives attended the courthouse but chose not to speak with reporters. Meanwhile, Morton's attorney and prosecutor Jennifer Nichols intended to file a motion to preserve evidence, including information obtained from social media. January 2017 saw Shanynthia formally charged with 4 counts: aggravated child abuse, aggravated murder with a deadly weapon, another count of aggravated child abuse, and child neglect. The investigation into the mysterious and gruesome events continued, leaving the community seeking justice and answers to numerous questions. During the hearing, loved ones of Shanynthia testified about the events of that fateful day. Sonia, Martin's mother, was shocked to learn of the tragedy and rushed to the scene to find her grandson, Der. Initially, she thought something supernatural was involved, but as the shock wore off, she considered possible motives. Sonia wondered if their potential divorce and fear of caring for 5 children alone might have driven Shanynthia to commit the horrific act. The trial was significantly delayed due to Shaninthia's multiple psychiatric evaluations. However, in 2021, the non-jury trial finally commenced. The defense centered its strategy around Shaninthia's mental illness, while the prosecution acknowledged her condition but argued that she could distinguish right from wrong and understood the illegality of her actions. In December 2021, Judge James of the Shelby County Criminal Court rejected the defense's argument, and Shanynthia Gardner was found guilty of all charges. 2 months later, Shanynthia, 34, appeared in court for sentencing, accompanied by her husband Martin. Judge James sentenced her to life in prison for each murder count, plus 15 years for each count of child abuse and neglect. Shanynthia can apply for parole only after serving 51 years. Considering the 5 years she spent in prison before sentencing, she will be eligible for parole in approximately 46 years, at the age of 80. After the sentencing, the prosecutor expressed agreement with the decision, citing that it aligned with their goal of achieving justice for Martin and his children. Upon hearing the verdict, Martin felt a sense of relief knowing that Shanynthia would no longer be able to harm any more children. An evening vigil was held at the apartment complex where the family lived, attended by neighbors, family members, and law enforcement officers. The gathering was a tribute to the innocent victims, with attendees holding red and white candles and offering prayers for the departed souls. The Reverend Pastor of the Baptist Church emphasized that the vigil marked the beginning of the community's healing process. He noted that those present were united in their desire to support the surviving baby and his father during this challenging time. Dorr did not attend the memorial ceremony, with his grandmother Sonia explaining to the media that he was too consumed by anger to participate. The president and CEO of the Children's Hospital where Shanynthia worked extended condolences on behalf of the hospital staff. Martin's colleagues created a social media account to support him with the funeral arrangements for his 4 children. At the ceremony, Martin displayed remarkable strength and dignity in his speech as he shared a few words about his children and family. He concluded by emphasizing that his home was once filled with happiness when his children and Shanynthia were present, and that he would always cherish this memory. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Catherine Wells Burr. On the morning of September 12, 2012, a local resident named Orlando was hurrying home after a lengthy night shift at a gas station. He had promised his wife that he would take their young daughter Maria to daycare. Loud music played in the car to keep him awake as the trees along the road swiftly passed by one after another. As he emerged from a sharp turn, he saw black smoke. Orlando slowed down. Smoke was billowing from a nearby parking lot where a car was engulfed in flames. Orlando stopped, ran to take a closer look, but couldn't get close because of the fire. 4 minutes later, when the firefighters arrived at the scene, the car was completely burnt out. The arriving police cordoned off the area with safety tape to keep the gathering onlookers at a distance. The place was quite deserted so early in the morning, and there were no witnesses nearby who could describe the incident's exact moment. Upon examining the scene, a charred body was discovered. The police had to identify the victim and determine the causes of this tragic death. There were no signs of a car accident or skid marks found nearby. Similarly, no tire tread marks from another vehicle were found. The police's initial theory was that the death was caused by a car self-ignition or spontaneous combustion due to malfunctions. A lengthy investigation and multiple expert analyses were ahead. The remains were transported to the forensic laboratory to determine the identity and cause of death of the deceased. Fragments of the burned vehicle were also delivered to the forensic laboratory to identify any malfunctions and establish the cause of the fire. The police began their investigation by checking the missing persons database and recent reports of disappearances. Forensic experts quickly identified the deceased. She was a 23-year-old local resident, Catherine Wells Burr. On the same day, a report of a missing person was filed by Rafal Novak concerning the disappearance of her. According to Rafal Novak's report, he left for work at 5:30 a.m., while his girlfriend Catherine was still sleeping soundly at home. Although they worked for the same company, his shift started 2 hours earlier. When Catherine did not show up for work after this time and Rafal could not find her at any of places, he contacted the police. The investigation began. The police interviewed the victim's parents and sister, as well as Rafal Novak, who reported her missing, and all her colleagues and friends. Gradually, by piecing together information about the last days and subsequently the years of the young woman's life, they managed to reconstruct a sequence of events that led to her tragic demise. Catherine Wells Burr was born in 1989. Her father and mom, Phil and Jane Wells Burr, in the United Kingdom. She was the second child in her family, with an older sister named Lynn. During the summer of 2010, while on a university break, Catherine met one of the employees, 31-year-old Rafal Novak, on a new vacuum cleaner production line. The tall, ruggedly handsome blonde quickly caught Catherine's eye. He was an immigrant from Poland with a former wife and son back home. About 4 years prior, he had moved to England in search of a better life. Catherine and Rafal soon started dating. Initially, they met for lunch at the cafe on the production site, but these lunches quickly turned into romantic dinners. Rafal courted Catherine beautifully, gifting her lovely bouquets, taking her to movies, and going for walks. Rafal opened up to Catherine, sharing his past life and reasons for moving to the UK. Catherine's trusting heart let the blonde man in completely. Their relationship progressed so swiftly that within a few months, Catherine introduced Rafal to her parents. They joyfully welcomed their daughter's choice into the family, hopeful for the couple's future happiness. Soon, the lovers were planning their wedding. In 2011, Catherine graduated with honors from Bath Spa University and landed a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the company that manufactures Henry vacuum cleaners. She quickly advanced in her career, providing good job opportunities for her parents and sister. Catherine was intelligent and well-educated. She always knew how to approach people, was concerned with her colleagues' problems, and was very attentive to those around her. Her kind gaze and radiant smile endeared her to people who held the young leader in high regard. Catherine Wells Burr's career was on a fast track to success. Her substantial earnings, combined with those of her partner Rafal Novak, allowed them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace in Willow Way. Despite their financial well-being, the house was bought on a mortgage, for which the young couple secured insurance coverage as per their agreement with the bank. Youth, successful careers, and love. It seemed they had everything needed for happiness. Yet, the fateful day of September 12, 2012, marked a dividing line in their lives, changing everything from before to after. The investigation pressed on, uncovering new and unfamiliar facts about the lives of Catherine and Rafal. Over time, the veil of deceit that had enveloped their relationship from the start began to lift. 29-year-old Rafal Novak left behind a wife and child in Poland, fleeing to escape significant debts. He relocated to the UK, where he met Anna Lagwinowicz. Since 2008, they maintained a close relationship, then Catherine came into the picture for a while. Rafal saw both women, but ultimately he chose Catherine Wells Burr, seeing her as a more viable option for a family and financial stability. While Catherine genuinely dreamed of a happy marriage with the man she loved and starting a family, Novak was plotting a scheme to end her life, intending to leave himself and his mistress, Anna Lagwinowicz, with the life insurance payout and the large house, a significant portion of the funds for which had been contributed by Catherine. The plot of this crime was meticulously planned and executed with even greater cruelty and cold-bloodedness. On the day of her disappearance, after waiting a few hours, Rafal approached Catherine's boss to inquire about her whereabouts, feigning sincere panic and despair in front of Catherine's colleagues and relatives. Catherine was not found at her parents' home, nor at her own, and her car was missing as well. Rafal recalled that she had been receiving threatening letters from a certain mentally unstable admirer for some time. Following this, her family contacted the police. The family was in the living room of the young couple's house, awaiting her return, when they were informed that a burning car with a body inside had been found. Rafal mentioned that the evening before her disappearance was entirely normal. The couple had gone for a walk after work, stopped by a store for groceries, had dinner, and then went to bed together after watching some television. Catherine did not appear scared or disturbed. However, a more detailed investigation proved that her death occurred earlier. Catherine was strangled around 2 a.m., likely in her own bed while she was sleeping. Her lifeless body was then placed in the car, taken a short distance from the house, and callously set on fire in an attempt to destroy evidence. Yet Rafal Novak had a solid alibi. He was at work from 5:30 a.m., and according to him, Catherine was asleep in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m. However, Rafal was still at home at 1:30 a.m., significantly altering the case's direction. Thus, Rafael Novak became the prime suspect in the murder of Catherine Wells Burr. Evidence allowed for Novak to be detained pending further investigation. Rafael claimed that Catherine was being pursued by a stalker who had repeatedly written to her and driven her to hysteria. During the investigation, it was revealed that Catherine indeed had accounts on several adult websites, indicating a hidden side of her life unknown to her close ones. Intimate photos and flirtatious exchanges with men were found, along with a letter from a secret admirer. However, no matter how long you try to twist the truth, it always comes to light. In an attempt to mislead the investigation and direct it towards a false trail, Rafael forgot to destroy the evidence proving his direct involvement in Catherine's demise. Importantly, this provided the prosecution with a motive. Upon examining Novak's phone, investigators discovered that he never ceased communication and meetings with Anna Logvinovich. They actively met over the last few months, and it was also found that the man had a financial interest. Shortly before Catherine's demise, they both insured their lives for a sum of £123,000, with Catherine and Rafael being the sole beneficiaries of the insurance contracts and recipients of the payouts. The receipt of a substantial life insurance sum emerged as the primary motive in the case regarding Catherine's demise and the arson of her car to confuse the investigation. Police discovered that on the day of Catherine's disappearance, she sent a message to Anna Logwinowicz's phone. Surveillance cameras also revealed that a few days before the crime, Anna and her uncle filled a full canister of gasoline at a gas station, suggesting their potential involvement in the case. 32-year-old Anna Lagwinowicz and her 38-year-old uncle, Tadeusz Dmitryshin, became suspects in the complicity of intentional crime and arson to conceal evidence. The crime was meticulously planned over several months by the trio. They prepared thoroughly for the act, creating accounts on pornographic websites, uploading photoshopped images of Catherine, and fabricating and saving exchanges with various men to lead the investigation astray with a false trail. When Rafael and Anna realized it was futile to deny the irrefutable evidence, they started blaming each other. The conspirators wove a web of deceitful lies around an honest and cheerful young woman. They created fake online profiles for her on websites used by people seeking casual sexual encounters, and went to great lengths to conceal their crime, not only setting her body on fire, but also fabricating a completely fictitious backstory for her. They intended to depict Catherine as a promiscuous woman with many secrets and desires. One of the conspirators sent a text message from Catherine's phone at 5:17 a.m. on the day of her death to a fictional person, suggesting she was headed to meet him. However, forensic experts determined that when the fire started in the car, Catherine was wearing only her favorite nightgown, not the outfit she would have chosen for a meeting with a man. The police also discovered that a pillow was missing from her bed, and the only pillowcase had been washed and was hanging on a clothesline, leading them to believe she was suffocated in Anna Logwinowicz's car. Detectives found a SIM card linked to the number Catherine was supposed to have texted that morning in Anna's apartment trash bin, and they also found notes she had written seeking inspiration for messages supposedly sent by the mysterious person. As soon as Novak and Lainovich realized the game was up, they both claimed that Catherine's demise was the act of a hired criminal. A week before the trial began, Anna asked a fellow inmate to secretly pass on a fake confession from an imaginary hitman who claimed Novak paid him £20,000 sterling to end Catherine's life. The story penned by Lainovich might have offered a chilling insight into what happened to their victim, according to this fictional hitman. Rafael Novak played the role of a loving boyfriend perfectly in the days leading up to Catherine's demise, holding hands and kissing her in front of family members. He even told her mother, Jane, that he had lost his world and his future. Rafael Novak refused to acknowledge his involvement in the young woman's death and went further, telling her mother, Jane Wells Burr, that her daughter was receiving emails and text messages from an ex-boyfriend who said if he couldn't have her, no one could, to complete the narrative. He even claimed she spoke of taking her own life. Worse still, Novak let the distraught Wells family parents comfort him, who believed he was also mourning the young woman he loved. Rafal's acting was so convincing that Catherine's mother, Jane, hugged him after her death and allowed him to call her Mom. She said that after the police told her in the early days of the investigation that he was seen more as a witness than a suspect, she decided to offer him all the support possible. "I thought if Catherine loved him that much and he was part of our family, then he deserved to come back." The lengthy trial commenced under the chairmanship of Justice Sharp. The jury heard during the trial that the three defendants hoped to receive a life insurance payout of £123,000 sterling and half ownership of a two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000 sterling, following Catherine Wells Burr's death. The court was told that Rafal Novak showed no emotion when police discovered the woman's body in her burned car on the morning of September 12th. Anna Lagwinovich, who often shook her head and laughed on the defendant's bench when Novak suggested she was responsible for the crime, refused to take the witness stand. Dmitry Sheen also did not testify in his defense during the trial. Judge told the defendants that the murder was a terrible, merciless crime, cold-bloodedly committed with a gross breach of trust. None of the three showed any emotion during the sentencing. Judge Justice Sharp sentenced the three Polish nationals to mandatory life sentences with a minimum of 32 years in prison without the possibility of early release. The judge expressed heartfelt sympathy for Catherine's parents. They could never have known that behind the facade presented to them by Rafal Novak was a person devoid of remorse and decency. It was all about the money. Novak and Catherine had no ties binding them. They were not married, nor did they have children. The crime against Catherine was motivated by money, selfishness, and greed. While in the case of Anna Lagwinovich, it stemmed from jealousy and a desire for revenge. At the request of the parents, Judge Justice Sharp read statements from Catherine's mother and sister. Her mother wept in the courtroom as her statement was read, which said Catherine was a caring, loving, sincere, generous, loyal, thoughtful, exceptional, and amazing. She had a bright and promising future with so much potential. Her parents, Phil and I, were immensely proud of the young woman she had become. The manner of Catherine's passing, a cruel and calculated act of villainy, and the hatred shown to her, will haunt us for the rest of our lives. Now, she considers Rafal Novak an evil person who should spend the rest of his life behind bars. Catherine's father, Philip, added that they took him into their home, and he became like a son, but he betrayed them all during the trial. Rafal Novak, covered in tattoos, wept in the witness box, insisting he had no part in the demise of his true love. A father of one, who has a wife and a teenage son back in Poland, told the jurors that everyone is blaming him for something he never did. The court heard that Novak showed no emotion when the police discovered Catherine Wells Burr's body in her burned car. Her mother, Jane Wells Burr, told the jurors that he didn't even mention Catherine, instead asking for a steak dinner after his initial release from police custody. Mrs. Wells Burr said that as soon as they bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy, her daughter's fate was sealed. She told the police that her life had a bounty on it, and indeed, she had signed her own death warrant the moment she signed the mortgage. Thus, 31-year-old Rafal Novak, a factory worker, was found guilty of the crime against his girlfriend, having suffocated her with a pillow while she slept. Afterward, he orchestrated a conspiracy with his secret lover, 32-year-old Anna Lagwinovich, and her uncle, 38-year-old Tadeusz Dmytryshin, to claim a life insurance payout of £123,000 and a share in the house. It is believed that they also lived in Taunton, took Wells Burr's body in her Ford Focus to a remote location 7 miles from the city, and set the car on fire at 6 a.m., by which time Novak was already at work, providing him with a solid alibi. The jurors of the Royal Court of Bristol found Rafal Novak, Anna Lagwinovich, and Tadeusz Dmytryshin Shine, all originally from Poland, guilty of the crime. The crime was the culmination of months of secret meetings and phone calls between Rafal Novak and his Polish lover, Anna Lagwinovich, with Catherine completely unaware of her role in what turned out to be a love triangle. The accused spent months leading detectives on a false trail, creating fake profiles for the girl on adult websites, and sending her messages from a supposed mysterious lover. Following the verdict, the parents of the young woman who lost her life, Catherine Wells Burr, called for stricter immigration controls. Philip and Jane Wells Burr, who have separated after the tragic loss of their daughter, stated that Rafał Nowak, convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland, would not have been allowed entry into the UK if the immigration rules were as stringent as those in the United States of America. They blamed the European Union and stated that the UK needs to tighten its entry measures for foreign nationals. Family members of Catherine Wells Burr wept in court as the sentence was announced. The three perpetrators showed no emotion. The criminal trio received life sentences without the possibility of parole. Now, they have their whole lives ahead to ponder over criminal schemes, but without any chance to put them into practice. Thus, through their own efforts, the Polish immigrants traded their dreams of a successful and wealthy life for free prison cells. After the verdict was announced, the victim's mother spoke her final words, describing her daughter as a beautiful young woman. She expressed pride in her daughter's academic accomplishments, having earned a first-class degree from the University of Bath Spa. The mother described her daughter as determined, hardworking, and beautiful, and expressed the difficulty of continuing on without her. She lamented the loss of her daughter's great potential and the happiness she could have experienced, stating that her life was taken away and the family was robbed of her presence. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Young. Jason Young comes from Brevard, North Carolina, where he was born in 1974. He grew up in an ordinary family. After graduating from high school, he became a student at the prestigious State University in the capital of his native state, the city of Raleigh. And after graduating, got a job as a salesman in a large retail chain. At work, Jason Young proved himself to be a valuable and promising employee who could always be relied on. But friends spoke of him as a man who was windy and fickle in relations with the opposite sex. He was fickle and often changed women, for which he got a reputation as a womanizer, which, however, he himself was even proud of. Michelle Marie Fisher was born in New York in February 1977. She was raised with her younger sibling, Meredith, with whom they were very close from childhood. Their mother, Linda, spent a lot of time with her adored daughters, tried to support them in everything, and contributed to the development of their abilities and talents. Since her school years, Michelle was fond of law and economics, dreaming of linking her life with this very activity. After graduating from school, she applied to several universities at once, and soon received a positive answer from the capital of North Carolina. The girl diligently studied at the Faculty of Economics and Law, receiving a master's degree in this field. After receiving her diploma, Michelle was hired for a high position in one of the leading accounting firms in the state. Yesterday's student was earning well, fully supporting herself, and making big plans for the future. She decided to celebrate her 24th birthday at one of the most popular entertainment venues in the city with her close friends and colleagues. They were heartily enjoying themselves when some stranger awkwardly turned around and knocked a glass with a cocktail out of the birthday girl's hands. The guy immediately started apologizing and, to make amends, bought Michelle another cocktail. That young man was Jason Young, and the pretty young Michelle immediately caught his eye. He sat down at her table and started a casual conversation, joked a lot, tried to be witty and interesting, and at the end of the evening asked her out on a date. Michelle also liked the casual acquaintance, so she willingly accepted his invitation, deciding that it was fate itself made her a gift on her birthday. The couple began to communicate, and soon they realized that they had a lot in common. They both studied at the same university. Although Jason got his degree 3 years earlier, supported the same hockey team, and were fans of the same music group. Between young people, quickly began a romantic relationship. But to live together, let alone get married, was out of the question at the start of his relationship with Michelle. Jason was still living at his parents' house in Brevard, and he would only visit his girlfriend in Raleigh on weekends or meet with her during work trips to the state capital. During one of these meetings, his sweetheart informed him that she was pregnant. This news was a real shock for both of them because neither of them was ready for the birth of a child. They were focused on their careers, confidently climbing the ladder, and did not plan to start a family yet. Jason said so at once, but after some hesitation, Michelle decided that she would not have an abortion and would keep the baby. Jason took about a month to rethink the situation, after which he moved to Raleigh to be near his pregnant girlfriend. After a few more months, the couple officially legalized their relationship, not out of love or pregnancy, but due to Michelle's lack of health insurance. Childbirth would have cost the couple a considerable amount of money, but marriage gave them the opportunity to avoid such expenses. The couple's daughter, Young, was born in the spring of 2004. She was given the name Cassidy Elizabeth. The newly married mother went headlong into domestic life and family chores, and her mother and younger sister helped her with this. It should be noted that Michelle's family coolly accepted her chosen one. They were wary of Jason, but tried to avoid conflicts. In the same year, they with a child moved to their own large house located in a quiet and landscaped area of the city. Mother Linda, who came to visit her daughter and granddaughter and help with the household, was the first to notice that there was a certain tense atmosphere in this family. Son-in-law Jason was too emotional and could potentially cause a strain right on the spot. But Michelle made every effort to resolve all the argumentative. In public, she behaved like the happiest wife and mother. Only Mother Linda could honestly describe what was truly occurring. An ominous omen occurred when Cassidy was barely 2 years old. Michelle became pregnant again, and she broke the news to her spouse, but he reacted calmly and seemed even happy about it. Soon, the family traveled by car to Brevard to personally inform Jason's parents of the happy news. They came to visit only for the weekend, and on the first day, they celebrated the upcoming addition to their circle of relatives. The next day, leaving their young daughter with her grandparents for a couple of hours, the couple went to a restaurant to celebrate the event together. As the couple was driving home, Jason, who was at the wheel, excessive steering, and the car went off the road and into a ravine. The couple were shaken but sustained only a few abrasions and bruises, and their lives were not in danger. However, Michelle had a miscarriage. Jason, on the other hand, took the news surprisingly calmly. The accident, the loss of a child, and some strange indifference of the husband, all this looked very suspicious. Later, Linda Fisher would call that accident a bad omen that no one paid proper attention to at the time. They had a mutual friend named Michelle Manny, whom they had known since their days at the same university. For some time, they did not see each other, but in the spring of 2006, shortly before the accident, Jason, during a work trip, accidentally met an old acquaintance. He told his wife about it, and together they decided to invite Manny to visit him. The young woman willingly accepted the invitation, but during her visit, she began to complain about her unhappy family life and problems in her relationship with her husband. At the same time, she constantly praised Jason and told his wife how lucky she was. Jason had frequently flirted with various women in the past, but this particular relationship quickly evolved beyond mere flirtation and friendly support. Jason Young and Michelle Manny started calling each other almost daily and secretly meeting up. Jason consistently explained his absences as being due to business trips, and his wife remained unaware of the truth. In the summer of 2006, Michelle informed her husband that she was pregnant again, but this time Jason was not happy at all. The wife did not understand what was happening. She felt that the beloved was away from her, but believed that this was due to the miscarriage that occurred a few months ago. Jason himself all this time was thinking hard about how to get rid of marital bonds with the least loss to himself. In early November, when Michelle was 5 months pregnant, her husband had another business trip. He traveled 300 miles away from home in his own car, but had booked a hotel room about halfway through the trip. That evening, a pregnant Michelle had a long conversation with her best friend on the phone, telling her about problems in the family and mentioning that she had had a big fight with her husband the night before he left. After the conversation, she went upstairs, put her daughter to bed and fell asleep next to her. About 10 in the evening, Jason reached the hotel and, as he claimed to be tired from the road, went straight to bed. In reality, he was scrutinizing all the entrances, exits, and the location of the security cameras, planning how to leave the hotel and then return undetected, preparing an ironclad alibi for what he thought would be the perfect crime. In the early morning hours, Jason called his wife's sister to ask for help. He said he wanted to give his wife a piece of jewelry for their wedding anniversary, but he had accidentally sent a page from an online store to the home fax machine. He worried that Michelle would see his gift and there would be no surprise. Meredith, though she disliked her son-in-law, still agreed to help him. The police chiefs of Wake County received a 911 call at 1:30 p.m. from 5108 Birchleaf Drive, the Enchanted Oaks area, after Meredith Fisher found her sister Michelle lying face down in a pool of blood in her bedroom. Fisher told the 911 dispatcher that she thinks her sister is dead. It looks like there are bloody footprints all over the house, like the little footprints of Michelle's daughter. Michelle Young died from severe injuries, having been struck in the head at least 10 times during a struggle. When Meredith arrived at her sister's house, she entered through a secret door in the garage that only family members knew about, and that was always unlocked. The house was suspiciously quiet, although the landlady's papers, keys, and wallet were in the hallway, indicating that she hadn't gone anywhere. When she went upstairs, Meredith saw that the bedroom door was wide open, but neither her sister nor her niece answered her call. When she walked into the room, she was met with a horrifying sight. Michelle lay on the floor next to the bed with a fractured skull, in a pool of her own blood. Blood was everywhere. On the walls, the furniture, and bloody child-sized footprints were visible next to the body. Sadly, there was nothing that could be done for the pregnant woman, as she had been dead for hours. Her sister quickly called for emergency assistance. Suddenly, she heard rustling under the bed, looked there, and saw little Cassidy, who looked at her incomprehensibly. Cassidy was not hurt, but she was frightened. The girl saw her mother's death and afterwards spent many hours by her body, as evidenced by the marks on the floor as well as the toys she brought to her mother. Later, forensic experts found a huge number of bruises, abrasions, and fractures on the body of the deceased, which spoke of a long and brutal beating. Michelle's teeth were knocked out, and her skull was fractured with a blunt, heavy object. Later, this instrument of crime was never found. A bloody pillow was lying next to the body, and the marks indicated that the victim had been smothered with it. Nothing was stolen from the house, which means that the night visitor had only one goal: murder. In addition, the locks had not been broken, and there were no signs of forced entry, indicating that the perpetrator had a key or knew about the secret door, which again was known only to family members. In such cases, the main suspect is typically the spouse of the deceased, but in this instance, the individual had an apparently flawless alibi. He asserted that he checked into his hotel room and did not depart until the following morning, when he attended a scheduled business meeting. A review of the records confirmed that Jason had used his room keycard in the evening to enter and in the morning to exit. However, a thorough investigation subsequently uncovered a multitude of irregularities and contradictions. For example, a hotel employee discovered early in the morning that the emergency exit was not only open, but also propped up with a cobblestone to prevent the door from slamming shut. When the investigation decided to check the surveillance camera pointed at that door to find out who had done it, it turned out that this very same camera had been deliberately disabled on the night of the crime. Moreover, it stopped recording about half an hour after Jason checked into his room. The weirdness didn't end there. It turned out that during the night, a man who looked like Jason was getting gas at a station between the hotel and the crime scene, but during the night, he was asked to provide identification as per the rules. He refused to do so, paid cash, and without waiting, quickly left the gas station. The attendant at the inquest identified Jason Young, but the man continued to deny everything, insisting that he had slept in his hotel room during the night. Another oddity was that on the day before the tragedy, Jason called Michelle more than 24 times, and closer to morning, he called his mistress 5 more times, with each conversation lasting no more than 15 seconds. This suggests that Jason was probably panicking, and all of these calls were made outside the hotel, where he, in his own words, had been all night. He was also late for a scheduled business meeting with his partners, and looked somewhat confused. However, none of this evidence, either individually or all of them together, proved that Jason had indeed massacred his pregnant wife. Years of investigation and a long-awaited verdict. For almost 3 years, Jason lived the life he'd always lived. Moreover, he achieved custody of his young daughter, which was a serious blow to the relatives of his dead wife. By that time, he stopped hiding his relationship with Manny, who was once friends with the murdered Michelle, which only increased suspicion that it was Jason who committed this brutal crime. Jason was arrested only at the end of 2009, but then, despite the large amount of evidence to prove his guilt, the case failed because the jury did not come to a consensus. However, the case was reopened in 2012 when more evidence was collected, and the testimony of witnesses who saw Jason Young that night outside the hotel in different places. In particular, his rather conspicuous white car was seen parked on the night of the murder, not far from his own house in an unlit lot, was also included in the case. Also included in the case was the testimony of a child psychologist who told of little Cassidy's strange doll play, during which the girl showed how her daddy spanked her mom, and then she would not get up off the floor. Mani took the stand as a witness in court. She confessed that Jason had cheated on his wife with her, but justified it by saying that he was deeply unhappy in his family life, as he told everyone. Another former mistress of the defendant admitted that she was afraid of his outbursts of anger when he lost control and could hit her. After a long trial, Jason Young was finally found guilty of brutally assaulting his pregnant wife. For this crime, he was sent to prison for life with no right to ever be released. In 2014, convicted Jason filed his first appeal, but it was denied. In 2018, he again asked for a review of his case, but a panel of the State Court of Appeals again denied it. Cassidy was virtually orphaned. Her mother was murdered and her father went to prison for the crime. The girl is being raised by her aunt and maternal grandparents. On November 9, 2006, the body of Michelle Young was laid to rest. This marked the end of a chapter in her life. Michelle Young's death caused a lot of commotion and uproar in the community, as the reasons and circumstances leading to her death. Both locals and strangers felt saddened and outraged that a precious life had departed so suddenly. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Trevone Miller. Brayla Stone, a 17-year-old girl from North Little Rock, Arkansas, was one of the most vibrant individuals in the Sherwood suburbs. Those close to her knew her as a cheerful and outgoing teenager with big dreams. She was an active user of social media, particularly Instagram, where she had amassed a following due to her excellent sense of humor. Despite facing negative reactions from some members of the community due to her being transgender, this did not diminish Brayla's pride in herself. She stood up against anyone who spoke or acted negatively towards her or her lifestyle. Instead, she embraced herself confidently and strongly, allowing nothing to hinder her path. Brayla enjoyed expressing her femininity both online and in real life. This was not only about how she dressed or wore makeup, but also about how she behaved and interacted with others. She knew that confidence did not come from holding an image others desired, but from how one accepts and loves oneself. Life was not always smooth and easy, but Brayla remained steadfast in her belief and her dreams. She believed that one day, the stage lights would shine on her, and she would stand under those lights proudly, showing the world who she was. Brayla was a strong and wonderful girl, and we use the pronoun she to refer to her as an acknowledgement and respect for her. In 2016, Brayla began an intimate relationship with a teenager named Trevone Hayes Miller. At that time, Trevone was working at a local Arby's and was just 18 years old. However, Trevone had a troubled past. He had been involved in a murder case at the age of 14 and had ties to a criminal gang. In April 2016, Trevone, along with two older teenagers, planned to rob another teenager named Brian Thompson, a 17-year-old marijuana dealer. The trio lured Brian to the parking lot of a local entertainment center with a promise to buy from him. Trevone carried a BB gun in his pocket, while one of his companions had a real handgun. As Brian was making the transaction, the oldest teen suddenly exited the passenger seat of the car and shot Brian in the neck, then stole $15 from him. Following the shooting, the group fled the scene. In the tragic death of Brian, we can see the cruelty and guilt in Trevone and his group's actions. It is evident that Trevone is not a good person. He is a criminal. This raises the question of why Brayla would date someone like Trevone. It is possible that Brayla was unaware of Trevone's criminal past, or there may be other unknown factors in their relationship. People have their preferences, interests, and choices, and sometimes relationships are not based on conventional standards. However, the attraction of some young women to boys with a bad past is not a universal rule. Each woman has her own choices and criteria in seeking a partner. The police found about a pound of marijuana in the car and arrested all three individuals within a day, less than 24 hours after the shooting. All three were caught after being recorded on a security camera near the crime scene. Trevone was eventually charged with aggravated robbery in a juvenile court. Initially, he faced a murder charge, but Trevone agreed to cooperate with investigators and testify against his accomplices, helping to reduce his charges. Although Trevone was never required to testify because his friends admitted their guilt, he was prepared to reveal text messages in court showing that he was the mastermind behind the robbery plan. Despite being the youngest in the group, originally Trevone wanted the robbery to take place in an old abandoned house they had previously used as a hideout. However, the only consequence for Trevone was a short time in a juvenile detention center, while his two older accomplices were charged and sentenced and remain in custody to this day. In 2019, Trevone was arrested again for robbery and impersonating a criminal in the second degree. This time, he impersonated a security guard at a Walmart store and tried to rob two customers in the parking lot. Just a few months later, he was arrested again on another weapons-related charge. Unfortunately, these chances for rehabilitation did not put him on a better path. Instead, they led to a tragedy that resulted in the untimely death of a young victim. In 2020, Trevone and Brayla were in a romantic relationship that was sexual in nature. Despite Brayla's confidence and self-acceptance as a transgender woman, she faced discrimination and harassment. Recognizing that not everyone was as open-minded, Brayla agreed to keep the relationship private to protect Trevone. However, Trevone's reluctance to go public was rooted in his own fear of societal backlash and the consequences it might bring. Rather than being honest with Brayla about his concerns, Trevone took advantage of her empathetic nature to shield himself from potential repercussions. Brayla and Trevone's mutual understanding began to break down when she found out he was secretly involved with another. This betrayal made Brayla feel uncomfortable and angry, prompting her to threaten to reveal their relationship. In response, Trevone offered to pay her off to keep quiet. Fear consumed Trevone, leading him to think negatively and act toxically. Rather than facing the consequences of his actions and taking responsibility, he tried to cut Brayla out of his life to keep their relationship a secret. Trevone confessed to his 19-year-old mistress that he was contemplating murdering Brayla to keep their illicit affair hidden. However, the young woman didn't take Trevone's ominous warnings seriously. Assuming he only made such threats when he was angry, she attempted to pacify him, hoping the situation would resolve itself without incident. Shortly after the phone call, Brayla arrived at Trevone's house, a fact verified by a friend who was on the phone with her while she waited for Trevone to answer the door. Following a 5-hour meeting with Trevone, Brayla sent a text to her friend expressing her dissatisfaction and mentioning that they had been arguing for hours. Brayla was never heard from again after this incident. The next morning, on June 25th, a passerby contacted the police to report a dead body in a park in Sherwood, a suburb of North Little Rock. The police found Brayla's body in a black Saturn Vue parked on a gravel path near 7224 Vista Point Court, which is visible from Gap Creek Drive. At the time her body was discovered, Brayla had already been reported missing to the North Little Rock police. When the police arrived, they discovered 17-year-old Brayla in an abandoned car along the gravel path, having been shot fatally in the head. Brayla was found with a gunshot wound through the head, her body positioned upside down on the front passenger floor with her legs on the back of the seat. The driver's side window was shattered. According to police reports, there were signs of blood inside the car and a strong smell of bleach. Investigators also noticed discoloration from cleaning agents on some of the car's interior. The news of Brayla's tragic death spread across media outlets. Notably, her family requested that all articles and segments about Brayla's story refer to her using the pronouns he and the name given to her at birth, despite the preferences she clearly expressed in the years before her death. It's evident that Brayla and her family were not on the same page, and they did not support her true identity, even in her absence. This is truly a heartbreaking tragedy. Even in her obituary, an old image of Brayla before her transition was used, evoking a deep sense of disappointment and regret. Instead of honoring and respecting her true self, her family chose to present images of a past that Brayla had overcome and sought to change. This reflects the negative aspects of a society still reluctant to accept and respect individual diversity and identity. It highlights a sense of injustice and pain as a person who, with all their efforts and courage to become the best version of themselves, is still undermined and overlooked. It's not just Brayla's death that is mourned, but also the sorrow for a society still rife with prejudice and discrimination. Following Brayla's death, a provocative Instagram post emerged claiming responsibility for her murder in exchange for $5,000. The user, Tappan Season, even posted a photo of a $100 bill as supposed proof. However, after 24 hours of intense backlash, the user confessed that they were, in reality, a 15-year-old seeking attention and had fabricated the entire story. This reckless and inexcusable act caused unnecessary confusion, grief, and fear within the community, particularly among Brayla's family and friends. The lack of prompt police action against the imposter further exacerbated feelings of insecurity and frustration. Although the teenager may avoid legal repercussions, the gravity of their actions remains severe. It is hoped that as they mature, they will come to understand the gravity of their behavior and learn from this experience, eventually becoming responsible adults who respect others and value integrity. It took the police 7 days to catch Trevone. According to the arrest report, Trevone became a prime suspect for the Sherwood police soon after the incident. A friend of Brayla's had informed the police that Brayla was with Trevone on the night she was murdered. This friend also revealed that the location where Brayla's body was found was a spot Trevone often visited for secret meetings, which was near his home in Sherwood. Additionally, Travone's manager at Arby's quickly contacted the police after Travone called her following his shift on the day Brayla died. Travone told his manager that he was overwhelmed, had messed up, and wouldn't be returning to work for a long time. When the manager asked Travone what he meant, he just said she would find out soon enough. As soon as the manager heard about Brayla's body being discovered, she informed the authorities. Eventually, on August 3rd, Travone was taken into custody. In court, the prosecutor claimed that Travone murdered Brayla to silence her and prevent her from revealing their secret sexual relationship. Apparently, Brayla had discovered that Travone was simultaneously dating another woman and had threatened to expose their past intimacy in public. Fearing that people would think he was gay, Travone allegedly bribed Brayla to keep quiet about their relationship. When he was 19, Travone was accused of the murder after he called his manager at Arby's, showing remorse for his actions. "I'm in big trouble, and it's all over for me," he said. "I've really messed up, and I won't be coming back for a very long time." Travone pleaded guilty in a deal that reduced his sentence. He was initially facing a murder charge, which carried a maximum sentence of life imprisonment or the death penalty. However, he reached a plea agreement to avoid these penalties. Notably, the investigation revealed similarities between Brayla's murder and another case, the April 2016 killing of 17-year-old Brian Allen Thompson at the Bill Harmon Recreation Center in Sherwood. Thompson was found shot in the neck, dead behind the wheel of his car, by a center employee. Travone was one of 3 teenagers charged in Thompson's death. Detective Craig Grisham of Sherwood observed that in both cases, the shooter fired from the passenger seat, which prevented the victim in the driver's seat from escaping quickly. Grisham also noted that both murders occurred at locations near Travone's residence, allowing for an easy escape from the scene without detection, as stated in the arrest affidavit. Travone Hayes Miller, 20, has been sentenced to 40 years in prison for first-degree murder, plus an additional 10 years for using a firearm, following the fatal shooting of 17-year-old Brayla Stone in Sherwood, a suburb of North Little Rock, on June 25th, just days before her 18th birthday. Miller has been imprisoned since his arrest about a week after the murder and must serve 35 years before being eligible for parole, which means he will be 53 years old by the time he is eligible for early release. As part of a plea agreement negotiated by his attorney, Burke Moore, and Deputy Prosecutor John Johnson, the murder charge was reduced. Brayla was among the 44 known transgender individuals in the U.S. who lost their lives to violence in 2020, marking the highest annual toll on record. Unfortunately, this alarming trend persists, with 34 fatalities already reported this year. It's likely that the actual number of victims is even higher, as some cases may have been misreported or underreported due to misidentification of the victims' names or genders by police or the media. Transgender activists, notably journalist Ashley Marie Preston, demanded attention to the murder of Brayla and urged for immediate action. They also implored the media to respect the family's request and use Brayla's birth name instead of her preferred name. Tonight, local groups are organizing a candlelight vigil in her memory at Bowl Park in Little Rock. Furthermore, a petition on change.org has gathered over 100,000 signatures. John emphasized that the tragic and often silent losses of Black transgender people, gay individuals, and non-binary persons, as well as the ongoing struggles of Black girls, will not go unnoticed, especially as we commemorate 51 years of pride and resistance that began at Stonewall. Meanwhile, mostly white reporters and media outlets led by white individuals are publishing reflective pieces that focus on the benefits gained by white gay people. Yet Black lives, particularly those of Black transgender women and girls, continue to be put at risk as people demand policy and practice changes that recognize and protect them. Following the tragic death of Brayla, local LGBTQ+ supporters in Central Arkansas came together to hold vigils in her memory. The Art Revolution Center, a Little Rock-based organization that focuses on youth, paid tribute to Brayla as someone who always made sure others felt comfortable being themselves and expressing their identities. The center invited those mourning her loss to wear her favorite colors, red and purple, as a way to honor her. Brayla's life was tragically cut short at the tender age of 17. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Leslie Palacio. The next major breakthrough came when Eric's car was spotted in Moreno Valley, California. Police eventually contacted Eric's cousin, who reported that he had driven Jose and his son to San Pedro, where they planned to cross the border into Mexico. The Las Vegas Police Department requested assistance from the FBI because they could not resolve the jurisdictional issue on their own. The investigation slowed down in January 2021, but for months after the discovery of the girl's remains, Eric's father, Jose, turned himself in at the border, and everyone was greatly relieved that at least one fugitive was now in custody. The man was quickly extradited back to Clark County and charged with destruction of evidence and accessory to murder. During interrogations, Jose tried to minimize his involvement in the crime, explaining the story of the trip to Mexico by his son's strange behavior on the morning of August 29th. However, investigators showed surveillance video footage that debunked his false claims, clearly showing him helping carry Leslie's body out of the house and washing the driveway. Faced with the evidence, Jose changed his testimony. He said he was working in the garage when Eric brought Leslie's body, wrapped in a sheet, into the garage. According to Jose, he panicked and helped his son load the body into the truck, assuming that Leslie had died of an overdose of illegal drugs because he saw no visible injuries on the body. Court documents indicate that Jose initially told police that, according to Eric, Leslie died of an overdose of illegal drugs. Jose also explained that Eric immediately talked about wanting to end his life, and he decided that the best thing to do for his son was to take him to Mexico. When investigators asked Jose for Eric's current whereabouts, he explained that as soon as the two of them entered Mexico and boarded the bus was searched by Mexican authorities. He and his son got scared and decided to split up, thinking that apart it would be harder for the authorities to find them. For this reason, he would love to help the investigation, but has absolutely no idea where his son might be. On June 18, 2021, Jose formally pleaded guilty to destruction of evidence and accessory to murder. Despite the horrific characteristics of his crimes, Jose was sentenced to only 2 years in the Clark County Detention Center, causing shock and dismay in the community. The Palacio family was shocked and outraged by Jose's lenient sentence, which they felt was unjust. During the pandemonium, Jose joined the court proceedings virtually, while Leslie's family and friends attended in person. They urged the judge to impose a harsher sentence, arguing that 2 years was not enough for an accessory to murder who helped dispose of the body and hid the perpetrator. Jose pleaded guilty and tried to apologize to the Palacio family, saying his love for his son outweighed him. He expressed regret for his actions, but the Palacio family did not accept his apology and did not consider it since, to date, Eric's whereabouts remain unknown and he continues to live a free life in Mexico. Jose was released on April 28, 2022. Ofalia Markarian, the attorney and representative of the Palacio family, commented that she is absolutely furious and that this is simply unfair. Not only is the main suspect not in custody, but the one who was involved in covering up the murder is back in custody after serving only 8 months and 15 days over the past 3 years. The Palacio family has never gotten justice, and Leslie's story highlights the flaws in the justice system and raises questions about fairness in dealing with serious crimes. The Palacio family is determined to fight to change the law in Nevada because they believe that whoever was involved in the murder should receive a longer prison sentence than 2 years. They hope that the perpetrator will be found and prosecuted in the United States, where he will be charged and given the punishment he deserves. Ofalia Markarian is directly reaching out to those who may know of Eric's whereabouts in Mexico. And in every media interview, she calls for the Palcio family to be given a small measure of justice. Leslie's discovery of her calling was unexpected, but she soon became an integral part of the team. Her colleagues regarded her as a responsible, professional lab technician and a warm, responsive person. While her duties involved conducting various analyses and tests, Leslie saw her role as more than just fulfilling duties. She was driven to make the testing process as comfortable as possible for patients. Her caring and patient nature created an atmosphere of trust, putting even the most apprehensive individuals at ease. When a young nurse asked if Leslie was afraid of getting her hands pierced all the time, she replied with a laugh that she now had a super ability to poke people. Her optimistic vitality was evident in every action. By all accounts, Leslie had the unique potential to become a sought-after specialist in medical laboratory diagnostics, and she would have, if not for a dramatic turn of events. Since childhood, Leslie had been accustomed to helping and caring for others. As the second of 5 daughters, she took on a maternal role when her mother, Rosilia Palacio, worked as a hotel cleaner. Rosilia remembered Leslie kicking her out of the kitchen when she tried to cook dinner after cleaning over 15 hotel rooms in a shift, gently urging her to rest. Leslie took it upon herself to prepare dinners, finding cooking to be a source of inspiration. From then on, she made sure her family members were well fed, even when she was away, calling home to ensure everyone had eaten. For Leslie, family was her top priority, and she easily inspired her sisters with her energy and ideas. Even during the pandemic, Leslie didn't let her love of sports fade away. She organized workouts in her backyard and taught her mom various exercises. She also danced daily in front of the mirror with her sister to music. Leslie's passion for experimenting with hair colors and image inspired her to create a joint business plan with her older sister to open a boutique. They started designing and sewing dresses at home in their own unique style. When Rosilia got laid off due to downsizing during the pandemic, Leslie suggested that her mom start her own small cleaning company. She promised to help her mom with cleaning services in her free time from work and school. At a family council, Leslie reassured her mom, "We'll be fine soon, you'll see." They came up with a name for the company, Palacio Cleaning Service. Leslie's dreams were finally taking shape as their family firm landed its first contract. But on August 29, 2020, all their plans and dreams came to a halt. By the end of August 2020, Leslie had completed the lab assistant program, and the family firm received a large order. Feeling stressed and worried, Leslie decided it was time to take a break and enjoy an evening of dancing and fun. With pandemic restrictions slowly lifting and Las Vegas coming alive, she felt it was the perfect time to unwind. Leslie's friends refused to accompany her, even though people were gradually overcoming their fears and returning to their normal routines. They were still uneasy about being in crowded, enclosed spaces. Despite this, Leslie remained hopeful of finding someone to share a fun evening with, so she posted on Instagram about her desire to do something unexpected. To her surprise, Eric Rangel Ibarra responded to her post. Leslie and Eric's families had attended the same church for 14 years and occasionally socialized, making them childhood acquaintances, though they had never been close. Leslie was aware of Eric's interests and had received friendly texts from him in the past, but she had never reciprocated his attention. She had always been polite to him, though. Ordinarily, Leslie would have turned down Eric's offer to keep her company, but this time, she was eager to break the monotony of her daily life with a fun evening, so she decided to accept his proposal. Leslie's friends were busy, so she took Eric up on his offer to share Las Vegas nightlife stories. Despite some unease, she decided going out with Eric was better than staying solo. Leslie regularly checked in with her sister, detailing her whereabouts and activities. When she mentioned Eric wasn't drinking, Kayla joked about healthy living. Eric and Leslie's first destination was the casino at the Longhorn Hotel. They arrived at 1:31 a.m. on August 29th in Eric's white Ford F-250, as shown by the surveillance footage reviewed by the police later. The couple spent about 25 minutes inside the casino, leaving at 1:56 a.m. After their casino visit, Leslie kept her sister updated on their activities, sending a message at 4:40 a.m. However, Leslie's next message was alarming, saying, "I need to talk to you about something shitty." Her sister inquired about the issue, but Leslie didn't respond. Instead, a text box appeared, indicating that Leslie had started to type a response, but never sent it. Unfortunately, this was the last message Leslie sent during her lifetime. The following morning, Leslie still hadn't returned home, and her family grew increasingly worried as the hours passed. Initially, they assumed Leslie had spent the night at Eric's house, but as time went on, their confusion deepened. Eventually, the family decided to check on Leslie at Eric's house, where they stumbled upon a suspicious scene. Eric's mother and daughter were removing furniture, pretending they had only just learned that Leslie and Eric had been together the previous evening. Fortunately, Leslie's family arrived at Eric's house just in time, preventing a significant delay in the investigation. The police found bloodstains in the house and a messy bedroom, suggesting that Eric's mother and sister had spent the day packing up their belongings, including furniture, instead of cleaning up evidence of a crime. This indicated that they were not going on a short trip, but rather planning a long-term absence, likely to reunite with Eric and his father, Jose, who had fled to Mexico to avoid prosecution. When Mrs. Ibarra met the Palazzo family, she likely realized their chance to escape had passed, and the panicked mother and daughter began denying any knowledge of Leslie's evening with Eric. Their suspicious behavior aroused suspicion that something serious had occurred. Luckily, the Las Vegas police acted quickly, issuing a billing inquiry to track Leslie's movements from the previous night. Although it took time to receive the data, the Palazzo family didn't wait and launched a campaign to spread the word about Leslie's disappearance. The community responded, sharing the information on social media, and surprisingly, many people, including Eric's mom, showed they cared. Detectives continued to question Mrs. Ibarra, seeking more information, and on August 31st, she went to the police station to file a missing persons report for her husband and son. Mrs. Ibarra claimed that her son, Eric, had left their home late on the evening of August 28th, returning the next morning, behaving strangely. She watched as he walked out the door again, but this time, he never came back. Police probed Leslie's disappearance and that of Eric and his dad. The Las Vegas police joined the case, searching for clues. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, seeking surveillance cameras. They found cameras at a house opposite Jose Barr's home, which might yield crucial evidence. They also obtained billing records, tracking Leslie's movements on August 29th, shedding light on the mystery. Detectives discovered that the couple visited a casino and then went to a grill bar, arriving around 2:15 a.m. Leslie's cell phone was left behind at the bar, and records show that she left the establishment around 5:50 a.m. Shortly after, at 6:05 a.m., neighborhood cameras captured Eric's car pulling up to their family home. The footage clearly showed that Leslie was heavily intoxicated as Eric assisted her out of the car and into the house. Later at 7:25 a.m., Eric and his father Jose were seen carrying Leslie's body, wrapped in a sheet, out of the house and placing it in the trunk of the car. Eric then drove away, while Jose hosed down the driveway to their house. This suggested that Eric and Jose were not missing persons, but rather fugitives trying to avoid justice. After reviewing the footage, police obtained a search warrant for Eric's home, leading to the discovery of additional evidence indicating that Leslie did not leave the house voluntarily. The house had been cleaned with strong cleaning products in an attempt to conceal evidence, and latex gloves and trash bags were also found. Furthermore, traces of blood were discovered on the floor and bed in Eric's room, strongly suggesting an assault. Without DNA testing, it was evident to investigators that the blood belonged to Leslie. From that point on, the search for Leslie Palau focused on finding her body. Meanwhile, Eric and Jose were reported missing, and investigators worked to identify suspects. The Palacio family, shaken by the events, also took action. Roselia, Leslie's mother, reached out to the church community for help in searching for her daughter's body. As a result, search volunteers, flyers, and posters featuring Leslie's photo and images of Eric and Jose began circulating on social media, in newspapers, and on street poles. The family appealed to the public to assist in finding the two men involved in Leslie's death. The first significant breakthrough in the investigation came when a license plate reader detected Eric's car just 6 miles from his home at 10 a.m., about 4 hours after Leslie's alleged murder. This discovery led investigators to believe that the body might be hidden within a 4-hour drive from Eric's home, possibly on the Nevada-Arizona border or in the Charleston Peak area. This was still a vast region, and detectives were eager for any additional information that could help them pinpoint a more specific location. Once again, luck was on their side when a gas station 40 miles north of Las Vegas captured footage of Eric's car pulling off the highway toward the Valley of Fire National Park. 20 minutes later, the car reappeared with muddy tires. This discovery narrowed the search area and indicated that the body was likely to be found within 20 miles of the gas station. The presence of mud on the tires suggested that Eric had driven off the road at some point. Detectives searched the area, and on September 9th, during a second search, they found Leslie Palo's body hidden behind a bush. News outlets immediately broke the story. The body of 22-year-old Leslie Palacio had been found near the Valley of Fire 11 days after she went missing. A reporter joined the broadcast providing additional details about the prime suspect, 25-year-old Eric Rangel Ibarra. The Valley of Fire, where the body was found, is known for its extremely hot climate, which led to rapid decomposition of the remains. As a result, forensic experts were unable to determine the exact cause of death. Locals were horrified and fearful after Leslie's death, with some becoming too afraid to venture outside due to the constant thoughts of the notorious criminals involved in the murder. The day after Leslie's body was found, September 10th, a large crowd comprising friends, relatives, neighbors, and local residents gathered to pay their respects to her memory. They took the candles used in the nightly vigil and placed them in front of her house, expressing their desire for the perpetrator to face justice for his heinous act. At this point, the quest for justice was far from over. A major breakthrough in the case came when Eric's car was spotted in Moreno Valley, California. This led police to contact Eric's cousin, who revealed that he had driven Jose and his son to San Pedro, where they intended to cross the border into Mexico. The Las Vegas Police Department requested the FBI's assistance due to jurisdictional issues they couldn't resolve on their own. Although the investigation slowed down in January 2021, there was a significant development months after the girls' remains were discovered. Eric's father, Jose, turned himself in at the border, bringing relief that at least one fugitive was now in custody. Jose was quickly extradited back to Clark County, where he was charged with destroying evidence and being an accessory to murder. During questioning, Jose attempted to downplay his role in the crime, citing his son's strange behavior on the morning of August 29th as the reason for their trip to Mexico. However, investigators presented surveillance video footage that contradicted his false claims, clearly showing him helping to carry Leslie's body out of the house and washing the driveway. Jose altered his testimony when confronted with the evidence. According to his revised account, he was working in the garage when Eric arrived with Leslie's body, wrapped in a sheet. Jose claimed he panicked and helped his son load the body into the truck, believing Leslie had died from a drug overdose due to the lack of visible injuries. Initially, Jose told police that Eric had stated Leslie died from a drug overdose. Jose also recalled that Eric had suicidal thoughts and, as a concerned father, decided to take him to Mexico. When questioned about Eric's current location, Jose explained that after crossing into Mexico and boarding a bus, they were searched by Mexican authorities. Feeling frightened, they decided to separate, thinking it would be harder for authorities to track them down. As a result, Jose was willing to cooperate with the investigation, but genuinely had no idea where his son was. On June 18, 2021, Jose pleaded guilty to destroying evidence and being an accessory to murder. Despite the heinous nature of his crimes, he was sentenced to just 2 years at the Clark County Detention Center, a decision that shocked and outraged the community. The Palcio family was particularly appalled by the lenient sentence, which they considered unfair. During the sentencing hearing, Jose participated virtually, while Leslie's family and friends attended in person. They implored the judge to impose a harsher sentence, arguing that 2 years was insufficient punishment for an accessory to murder who had helped dispose of the body and conceal the perpetrator. Jose apologized to the Palcio family, stating that his love for his son had outweighed his moral obligations. He expressed remorse for his actions, but the Palcio family rejected his apology, citing that Eric's whereabouts remain unknown to this day, and he continues to live freely in Mexico. Jose was released from detention on April 28, 2022. Ofalia Markarian, the Palcio family's attorney and representative, is outraged over the glaring injustice in the handling of Leslie's murder case. Despite the primary suspect remaining at large, the individual who aided in covering up the crime has been released from custody after serving a mere 8 months and 15 days over the past 3 years. The Palcio family is still awaiting justice, and Leslie's story highlights the flaws in the justice system, sparking concerns about the fairness of handling serious crimes. The family is determined to push for legal reform in Nevada, advocating for those involved in the murder to face longer prison sentences than 2 years. They hope the perpetrator will be found and prosecuted in the United States, where they will receive the punishment they deserve. Through media interviews, Ofalia Markarian is making a direct appeal to anyone with information about Eric's whereabouts in Mexico, urging them to come forward so the Palcio family can finally receive some measure of justice. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Mackenzie Sherilla. Mackenzie Sherilla was born in August 2004 in Strongsville, Ohio, the third of 3 children. Her parents, John Schilla and Natalie Stevens, made a conscious effort to raise their children with love, care, and a good education, always encouraging their endeavors. As the youngest daughter, Mackenzie was often spoiled and got away with many mischievous acts, including serious offenses, due to her parents' leniency. As she grew up, Mackenzie became a demanding and selfish individual. She was accustomed to getting her way and believed she was above consequences, no matter her actions. Classmates and teachers observed that Mackenzie was a pleasant and open child in her early years, but as she aged, her behavior and character began to deteriorate. She would throw tantrums when things didn't go her way, lost her temper easily, was impudent and impatient, used foul language, and was even known to get into physical altercations. Mackenzie refused to consider anyone else's opinions, always believing her own view to be the only one that mattered, and prioritized her own interests above all else. In her teenage years, Mackenzie's behavior became increasingly unbearable, but her parents turned a blind eye, attributing it to adolescence and believing that she needed understanding and patience. However, her defiant nature was only the tip of the iceberg. She developed a drinking problem in high school and occasionally dabbled in illegal substances, often getting away with it. Her reckless actions posed a direct threat not only to herself, but also to those around her. Despite this, her parents either failed to notice or chose to ignore the obvious issue. Like many of her peers, Mackenzie was obsessed with social media, rarely putting her phone down. She frequently posted provocative photos of herself smoking or drinking on her account, accompanied by equally provocative comments. Her friends were similar, and together they engaged in vandalism, organized fights, and occasionally stole from others, even catching the attention of the police on several occasions. However, they were merely given warnings and educational talks, which reinforced their belief that they were above the law. Dominic Russo, born in September 2001, was the fourth of 7 children to Frank and Christine Russo in Strongsville. Growing up in a close-knit family with 3 brothers and 3 sisters, Dominic received ample love, attention, and care despite being part of a large family. He excelled academically, actively participated in sports from a young age, and maintained a healthy lifestyle. His parents, Frank and Christine, struck a balance between being moderately strict and encouraging their children's overall development. As a result, Dominic was popular among his peers, often drew attention, and was known for his bright and attractive appearance. Focusing on meaningful connections, Dominic avoided casual relationships. After high school, he enrolled in a local university to pursue a degree in performing arts production, aiming to make a name for himself in the music industry. Dominic was a talented young man who wrote and performed his own songs. By the age of 20, Dominic had achieved significant milestones, establishing his own small business, buying a car, and renting a spacious apartment in a desirable neighborhood. He continued to excel in sports and was regarded as one of the top students at the university. Dominic and Mackenzie first met at a party surrounded by mutual friends when she was in her graduating class. This chance encounter proved to be a pivotal moment in their lives. As total opposites, they were instinctively attracted to each other. Dominic, a handsome young man with curly hair and a passion for music, immediately caught Mackenzie's attention. Unlike the guys she usually hung out with, he was educated, well-mannered, and interesting, able to converse on various topics. Mackenzie, a stunning woman with a slim figure and impeccable style, knew how to make a lasting impression. She turned on her charm to grab Dominic's attention, which she quickly achieved. The two started dating in the fall of 2021 and soon introduced each other to their parents. While Mackenzie's parents were thrilled with her choice and thought Dominic was perfect for their daughter, Dominic's parents, Frank and Christine Russo, had mixed feelings about Mackenzie. On the surface, she appeared sweet and innocent, trying to impress them, but something about her raised their suspicions. Mackenzie's friends and family believed she had genuinely fallen in love for the first time and hoped her relationship with Dominic would positively impact her character and behavior. At the time, no one could have predicted the tragic outcome of this romance. They quickly became inseparable, regularly holding hands and openly showing their affection in public. As a result, it didn't take long for the news of their relationship to spread throughout the small town. While those closest to Mackenzie felt sympathy for her boyfriend, most people were genuinely happy for they. However, Dominic soon realized that something was off. He began to notice strange behaviors in Mackenzie, such as her frequent outbursts of defiance and her insistence on getting her way in all interactions. At first, he didn't give it much thought, attributing it to her young age and desire for attention. They started making plans for their future together, including discussing marriage once Mackenzie turned 18. They also planned to leave their hometown and move to a major city, ideally New York, where Dominic could pursue a successful music career. As time went on, Mackenzie's behavior grew more and more unsettling, sometimes even scaring Dominic. She demanded that her boyfriend give in to her every demand, and when he refused, she would throw tantrums, acting like a spoiled kid. At first, Dominic tried to brush off her outbursts as a joke, but soon realized that this was the real personality of the woman he was dating. While she was able to keep up a good front in public, when they were alone, she would let loose a flood of emotions and even get physically violent. Mackenzie's behavior became increasingly aggressive, leading the young man to decide he'd had enough. He suggested they take a break to allow her to sort out her feelings, but this triggered a public outburst in front of their mutual friends. Mackenzie screamed, threatened to kill him if he left, and vowed to burn down his house and wreck his car. However, this dramatic display only reinforced his conviction that ending their toxic relationship was the right decision. Despite this, Mackenzie was determined to hold on to her boyfriend. She continued to call him, inviting him to parties and posting photos of them on social media with declarations of love. When Dominic made it clear that everything was over, she flew into a rage. Mackenzie began showing up at his house almost daily, yelling insults and threats under his windows. She called him from different numbers, left messages on his answering machine, and sent emails and social media posts. One moment, she'd swear her love and offer to start anew. The next, she'd descend into insults and threats once again. Dominic was utterly bewildered by Mackenzie's behavior, which he had never experienced before. He attempted to engage in conversation with her, ignoring her, and even recording her aggressive outbursts on his phone. However, Mackenzie's conduct escalated to the point where she would publicly confront Dominic, screaming and insulting him in front of bystanders. This turned his life into a living hell, but he still held on to the hope that with time, she would lose interest and move on to someone else. One day, in the presence of witnesses, Mackenzie brazenly declared that killing Dominic would be easier than letting him go. She threatened that if he didn't return to her, no one else would have him, and she would take care of it. Although Dominic didn't take her threats seriously, those around him recognized that Mackenzie was dead serious. The schoolgirl frequently issuing menace included promises to physically assault him, run him over with a car, kidnap him and drive off a cliff, or stop the car on train tracks in front of an oncoming train. Each sinister scenario was described in vivid detail, as if Mackenzie had meticulously planned it and was waiting for the perfect moment to execute it. Mackenzie realized that threatening and insulting Dominic wasn't getting him back, but rather pushing him away. So she changed her approach. She became sweet and charming once more, stopped pressuring and harassing him, and pretended to have learned from her mistakes, wanting to improve herself for the better. She brought up the upcoming university enrollment, asking for his help in choosing a university, and even claimed to be worried about her final exams. Dominic was pleasantly surprised by these changes and, despite everything, still had feelings for his former girlfriend. He decided to help her with enrollment, simply out of kindness. As a result, they started seeing each other and communicating again. They grew closer over time. Dominic began inviting Mackenzie on dates and sought to spend all his free time with her, believing she had changed, matured, and become more responsible. Without realizing it, he fell in love with her again, and all past grievances were forgotten. This time, however, they didn't rush to announce their reunion to friends and acquaintances. Their meetings were more like secret dates, where they simply enjoyed each other's company, avoiding the scrutiny of others. When Dominic's brother Angelo found out what was going on, he warned that their relationship would not end well. But Dominic, being deeply in love, ignored his brother's caution. Meanwhile, Mackenzie, who was obsessed with Dominic, devised a terrifying plan to take revenge on him. She began to fantasize about a high-speed car crash and spent hours driving around the city to find the perfect spot to put her plan into action. Since there were no steep cliffs nearby, she considered targeting a train on the tracks, but eventually decided it was too unreliable. One day, Mackenzie drove into a secluded industrial area with no cameras and very few cars. There, she spotted a massive brick wall, which sparked a new, equally horrific plan in her mind. She decided that if she drove at maximum speed and crashed into the wall, it would be just as sensational as plunging off a cliff. Initially, Mackenzie intended to die alongside Dominic, hoping their tragic story would be told and retold by everyone in the city. She even confided in her best friend, but her friend didn't take her seriously, thinking it was just another empty threat. Mackenzie had made similar claims before, but never followed through. In late July 2022, Mackenzie suggested to her boyfriend Dominic that they attend an upcoming party hosted by their mutual friends, just a week shy of her 18th birthday. The party would be a perfect opportunity for them to have fun, unwind, and publicly showcase their rekindled romance. Dominic agreed, still trusting Mackenzie's sincerity and intentions. The party took place on Saturday, July 30th. Mackenzie and Dominic arrived hand in hand, immediately drawing attention from the other guests. They looked happy, smiled, and openly displayed their affection for each other. Their friends were genuinely delighted with their reunion, noting that they made a lovely and harmonious couple. Throughout the evening and night, the young pair had a blast, happily took photos, and unhesitatingly kissed in front of everyone. Little did anyone know, this joyful celebration would soon turn into a devastating tragedy. Like the other partygoers, they had a few drinks, but Mackenzie secretly took an illegal drug to boost her courage and avoid getting cold feet. The next morning, Mackenzie and Dominic bid farewell to their friends and headed to their car, but Dominic's friend Dave requested a ride home. Mackenzie initially objected, citing their own plans, but Dominic saw no issue with giving his friend a lift, not wanting to arouse suspicion or alter their plans. Mackenzie reluctantly agreed, despite her reservations about the change in plans. Mackenzie got behind the wheel, her boyfriend sat in the passenger seat, and her friend sat behind him. With a slow and quiet start, the car pulled away from the party venue and headed onto Main Street. Mackenzie drove cautiously, keeping to the speed limit and avoiding drawing attention to herself. At a stoplight, she came to a halt, even though the road was empty. As her passengers dozed off, Mackenzie reconsidered her plan. She would later claim that she wanted to die in the accident, but this seems unlikely since she had fastened her seatbelt during the last stop, while her passengers remained unbuckled. When the light turned green, she accelerated quickly, taking a sharp turn onto a poorly lit secondary road that led into an industrial area. The guys were caught off guard, seemingly unaware of what was happening. The car sped up to its top speed, but Mackenzie continued to floor it, steering the vehicle straight into a blank brick wall. The crash occurred in the deserted industrial area early Sunday morning, with no witnesses or Good Samaritans to help. However, a woman living on the outskirts, near the accident site, heard the impact and went outside to investigate. She saw smoke and, upon closer inspection, realized that a car had crashed. After the accident, she rushed back inside to call emergency services. About half an hour later, medics arrived at the scene, but unfortunately, the two men in the car had died instantly. The girl driving the car, however, was still alive, thanks to her seatbelt and airbags. Mackenzie was unconscious, with her legs trapped in the wreckage, but she was breathing and had a palpable pulse, giving hope that she would survive. During the rescue process, she occasionally opened her eyes, but seemed unaware of her surroundings. Mackenzie was rushed to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed her with multiple fractures and internal organ damage. Blood tests revealed that she had been under the influence of both alcohol and drugs at the time of the accident. Ironically, the doctor believed that this may have helped prevent her from dying from shock while waiting for help to arrive. The police investigation initially suggested that Mackenzie, while under the influence, might not have realized what she was doing, and perhaps tried to drive through the wall or didn't see any obstacles. This theory was supported by the lack of braking distance. However, Mackenzie was unable to provide further insight as she was unconscious in the intensive care unit following a complex operation. Mackenzie regained consciousness and, overcome with emotion, confessed to the doctor on duty. She explained that she had intentionally driven into the wall at high speed, intending to kill her boyfriend and die with him. She clarified that Davin was an unintended victim, only in the car because of his own obsession, having asked to accompany them. Investigations revealed a different story. Surveillance footage tracked the initial part of the car's route, showing Mackenzie driving cautiously and following traffic rules, until she suddenly turned onto a road leading to an industrial area. Moreover, evidence emerged that Mackenzie had driven the entire route in both directions several days prior, with her car spotted by at least a dozen witnesses at various times. After leaving the hospital, Mackenzie bounced back quickly and resumed her carefree life. She socialized with friends, made future plans, and even attended a concert in a wheelchair, posting selfies on social media. By Halloween, she was back on her feet and dressed in costume, living life to the fullest. Mackenzie was arrested on November 4th, 2022. The investigation took just over 3 months to gather evidence and build a case against her. She was charged with premeditated, aggravated double murder and possession of a controlled substance, which was found in her pocket and detected in her blood. During the trial, Mackenzie changed her story multiple times. Initially, she claimed to have suffered a memory lapse, but after a friend testified against her, revealing her plan, Mackenzie shifted her defense, stating she wanted to die with her lover. However, this new claim was quickly disputed, as evidence showed she had worn a seatbelt. On August 21, 2023, the jury found Mackenzie guilty on all charges. Although she was convicted, the court took into account that she was not yet 18 years old at the time of the crime, only 5 days shy of her 18th birthday. As a minor under state law, she was eligible for a more lenient sentence. Mackenzie faced 2 consecutive 15-year sentences without parole for each murder. However, due to her youth, her sentences were allowed to run concurrently, making her eligible for parole in 15 years. At the time of her potential release, Mackenzie will be 33 years old. The court's decision left both sides dissatisfied. The families of the deceased youths announced their intention to appeal for a harsher punishment, while Mackenzie's lawyer felt the sentence was too severe and also appealed. Despite this, the judge refused to modify the sentence, stating that he doubted Cheryl would be released from prison after 15 years. In his view, the defendant had failed to show remorse for her crime, displaying arrogance and even contempt towards the court, and now had ample time to reflect on her heinous act. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kristen Rossum. Kristen Rossum, a chemistry graduate student at San Diego State University, had the potential for a bright future. However, she is now serving a life sentence at a women's facility in Central California for crimes committed against her husband, Ralph, and Constance Rossum. Kristen is a mother of 3, and despite her efforts to prepare them for a successful future, her own life took a different turn. Her children were receiving a well-rounded education with regular schooling, tutors, and participation in extracurricular activities designed to develop their talents. However, Kristen, who was fragile and impulsive, struggled to maintain this pace. She began to skip classes and sought escape from her reality, initially finding comfort and forgetfulness in this avoidance. However, after consuming alcohol, the calming effect wore off, and Kristen became dependent on methamphetamine, the most addictive illegal substance in the United States. The drug induced clouds of paranoia, euphoria, and hallucinations, leading to Kristen's erratic behavior and detachment from reality, as well as a lack of parental attention. Kristen confessed to being addicted to substances since her high school days, which was devastating news for her family of college-educated professionals. After months of turmoil with her parents, the 17-year-old Kristen secretly left home and went on vacation to Mexico with her friends, where she met Gregory DeVette, a tall, handsome man, 7 years her senior. Gregory took on a paternal role, and Kristen landed a job at the local forensic department as a toxicology assistant, impressing her employers with her skills and momentarily forgetting her addiction. Her position in toxicology gave Kristen access to controlled substances, and she went on to graduate from college with honors. Her relationship with Gregory lasted about 5 years, culminating in a grand wedding on May 5, 1999. Kristen's parents adored Gregory and were convinced that their daughter had overcome her dependency and was headed towards a life of great promise and happiness. In March 2000, Kristen landed a job as a toxicologist at the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office, where she learned to analyze body fluids for controlled substances. However, she soon became disillusioned with her mundane life and sought thrills elsewhere. She found an opportunity with her new colleague, Michael Robertson, who had just been appointed head of the department. As their romance blossomed, Kristen's marriage to Gregory began to unravel, despite his efforts to save it. Aware of his wife's vulnerabilities, Gregory struggled to hold on, but Kristen had made up her mind. On Monday, May 6th, she asked for a divorce. On November, Kristen went to work as usual, but she was very tired and worried about her husband Greg, who was sick and stayed home. In the days following their difficult conversation, Kristen was uneasy, but Greg seemed calm and indifferent. Uncharacteristically, Kristen informed her workplace about her husband's illness and visited him during her lunch break. That same day, at 9:22 p.m., Greg was asleep, and Kristen called the emergency services to report that her husband was not breathing, fearing he might have taken his own life. Overwhelmed with emotion, Kristen cried on the phone and didn't follow the dispatcher's instructions to examine Greg's body and potentially administer first aid. The police and paramedics arrived at the scene at 10:19 p.m. and found Greg lying lifeless on the bedroom floor, surrounded by scattered rose petals, with an exposed stem nearby. A preliminary examination revealed that Greg had likely consumed a lethal dose of multiple controlled substances, with empty vials of strong painkillers scattered around the room. Torn wedding photos were also found in his bed. During the interrogation, Kristen stated that she had told Greg about their separation the previous night, a mere 17 months after their wedding. Kristen regretted marrying him, feeling she had rushed into it. She mentioned that Greg was too clingy and she wanted space. Greg's death was officially classified as a suicide, with the autopsy revealing that he had succumbed to a lethal dose of strong sedatives. Kristen gave her consent for the cremation to proceed, but Gregory's family and friends were adamant that he would never take his own life. None of them had noticed any unusual changes in his personality or mood that might have hinted at his supposed suicide. In fact, Greg was known to be strongly opposed to controlled substances and would never resort to using them. His relatives were so convinced of foul play that they intervened to stop the cremation, demanding an independent autopsy to uncover the truth. The family's persistence led investigators to consider a murder scenario soon after the incident. An autopsy revealed a significant amount of fentanyl, a painkiller 150 times stronger than morphine, as well as smaller amounts of clonazepam and traces of oxycodone. Investigators suspected that someone else might have administered the lethal dose of fentanyl to Gregory, given the strong influence of clonazepam and other drugs found in his system. Since fentanyl is not an over-the-counter drug, Kristen became the prime suspect due to her knowledge and access to these substances. She was subsequently questioned by the police. During the police questioning, Kristen's disheveled appearance and erratic behavior suggested she was struggling with drug dependence, which she confirmed in her testimony. On the day of Gregory's death, Kristen's account of events was inconsistent. She initially told paramedics that Gregory had not taken any medication, but later suggested he might have been taking oxycodone. At the hospital, Kristen told a nurse that Gregory might have overdosed on oxycodone. Like other opioids, oxycodone can not only relieve pain, but also produce feelings of euphoria. However, it can weaken the respiratory system, and if not treated promptly, its use can be fatal. During their conversation with Kristen, police considered the possibility that Gregory's death was an accidental overdose of cold medicine and oxycodone. They also learned that Gregory was distressed about their failed marriage, which led Kristen to claim that he had taken his own life. This sparked another investigation, which uncovered more details. On November 8th, Russ Lowe, a co-worker of Kristen's, contacted the police and informed them about Kristen's affair with her boss, Dr. Robertson. This new information shifted the direction of the police investigation. Investigators found evidence of Kristen's relationship with Dr. Robertson, including passionate emails and computer files. They also discovered Dr. Robertson's expertise in fentanyl through professional articles. The evidence pieced together to suggest that Gregory had become a threat to the lovers. As Kristen had access to labs and controlled substances, it was suspected that she was secretly using them, and Dr. Robertson was covering for her. Dr. Robertson told detectives that he was aware of his lover's drug addiction. Although no charges were filed against the couple at the time, they were both fired for violating several rules during the investigation. Serious trouble began for Kristen in January when police raided her house, finding drug traces and evidence of personal drug use. She was arrested but later released on bail. As the investigation progressed, new information emerged, including her diary, which was seized during the initial search. Apparently, Kristen tried to conceal her involvement and assert her innocence by creating the illusion that her husband Gregory's death was self-inflicted. On the day of his death, she bought a rose, revealing her internal motivations. The medical examination revealed that Gregory was unconscious for at least 6 hours before he died, and his death may have occurred an hour or an hour and a half before it was officially confirmed. Furthermore, bruises were found around the needle mark on his arm. A shortage of the drug that led to Gregory's death, as well as other controlled substances, were discovered at Kristen's workplace. Police believe Kristen poisoned Gregory with alcohol and fentanyl without his knowledge. Kristen was arrested on June 25, 2001, and charged with first-degree murder. After 6 months in detention, she was released on bail, and the first trial began soon after. The prosecution's main theory was that she killed Gregory because he threatened to damage her good girl reputation by revealing her repeated drug use and affair with Michael Robertson. The prosecution alleged that Kristen fatally poisoned Gregory with fentanyl, a synthetic opiate that is 80 times more potent than morphine. According to them, Kristen initially attempted to kill Gregory using clonazepam, but after this attempt failed, she administered the fentanyl. The prosecution also contended that Kristen subsequently staged the scene in the bedroom to give the impression that Gregory had committed suicide by tearing out pages from her diary, scattering rose petals around his body, and positioning a wedding photo nearby. The court was told that Kristen, a biochemistry graduate, used her knowledge of drugs and chemistry to kill Gregory. Prosecutors alleged that Kristen tried to make her colleagues at the medical examiner's office believe Gregory's death was a suicide by withholding information about the fentanyl. However, before the autopsy could take place, Kristen was transferred to a different laboratory, and attempts to alter the toxicology report were unsuccessful. It was stated that on the morning of November 6th, Kristen phoned the owner of Gregory's apartment to report his absence, then went to work. Her colleagues testified that about an hour after arriving at the lab around 9 a.m., Kristen was seen crying in her manager Michael's office. The apartment building where Kristen and Gregory lived reported seeing Kristen return home at 12:10 p.m. At 12:41 p.m., she visited a local grocery store, buying several items, including a credit card statement with red roses, which confirmed she was still alive a few hours before Gregory's death. Kristen made several calls to Dr. Michael Brian Blackburn, the San Diego County medical examiner who performed Gregory's autopsy. Dr. Blackburn testified that Gregory had been dead for at least an hour before the paramedics arrived. At the time of death, Gregory was in the early stages of bronchopneumonia, a condition that occurs when breathing secretions accumulate in the lungs due to unconsciousness or inadequate breathing. The doctor also noted that Gregory's bladder contained a substantial amount of urine, which would have caused significant discomfort if he were conscious. From this, Dr. Blackburn inferred that Gregory had experienced breathing difficulties for around 6 to 12 hours before his death. Dr. Blackburn testified that the amount of clonazepam in Gregory's blood was insufficient to cause an overdose and was not the cause of death. In contrast, Dr. Theodore Stanley, testifying for the prosecution, explained that fentanyl is a powerful and fast-acting painkiller with serious side effects, including the potential to lead to respiratory arrest. The speed at which fentanyl takes effect depends on how it is administered, with peak effects occurring approximately 16 hours after a transdermal patch is applied, 20 to 30 minutes after oral administration, 15 to 20 minutes after intramuscular injection, and within 5 minutes of intravenous injection. Dr. Stanley noted that fentanyl is not usually given orally because the liver breaks down about 65% of it, leaving only 35% to enter the bloodstream. Both Dr. Blackburn and Dr. Stanley were unable to provide a clear explanation for how fentanyl entered Gregory's system. However, Dr. Stanley suggested that the varying concentrations of fentanyl in Gregory's body, combined with evidence that he was unconscious and breathing shallowly in the hours leading up to his death, indicate that fentanyl may have been administered to him. Although the prosecutor could not definitively explain how Kristen poisoned Gregory, the evidence suggested that she might have applied a fentanyl patch to his arm while he was sleeping. The fact that 15 patches went missing from the lab where Kristen previously worked supports this possibility. The defense claims Kristen is innocent, acknowledging that fentanyl caused Gregory's death, but arguing that he intentionally took it to end his life due to desperation stemming from family problems. In court, Kristen testified that on November 6th, she woke up to find Gregory in distress. At 7:42 a.m., she called his employer to report his illness and absence from work. Kristen told the court she went to her job but returned home to check on Gregory, asking why he was so upset. Gregory told her he felt unwell, having taken oxycodone and clonazepam, and planned to stay home and sleep. Under cross-examination, the prosecutor questioned Kristen's explanation, pointing out its strangeness. Kristen admitted to previously lying and hiding Gregory's drug use. The prosecutor suggested to the court that fentanyl was the ideal poison due to its difficulty in detection, knowledge Kristen likely acquired from her job. According to autopsy and toxicology results, Gregory was unconscious for around 6 to 8 hours, contradicting Kristen's claim of having lunch with him that day. The defense argued that Dr. Blackburn's finding of non-fatal blood levels of clonazepam was irrelevant because the combination of oxycodone, an opiate, and clonazepam, a benzodiazepine, can create a synergistic effect, making them more potent together. They suggested that Gregory may have unintentionally taken the drugs himself and questioned why the high levels of these substances in his system remained unexplained. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Kristen guilty of first-degree murder and murder under special circumstances by poisoning. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Despite maintaining her innocence and pleading no contest, Kristen's appeal was unsuccessful due to a mistake by her own defense team. They acknowledged that fentanyl caused Gregory's death, but failed to test autopsy samples for fentanyl metabolites, which could have determined whether Gregory ingested fentanyl or if the fentanyl found in the samples resulted from laboratory contamination after his death. The appeals court was told that there was a problem with the handling of the autopsy samples, which could have affected their integrity. Specifically, the samples were stored in an unsealed cardboard box, with each container labeled as coming from Gregory's body. The box was left at the medical examiner's office for about 36 hours before being sent to the forensic laboratory, which raised concerns that someone with access to the office could have tampered with the samples during that time. Kristen's appeal argued that on November 8, 2000, Michael had informed a toxicologist that he had tested a sample of Gregory's stomach contents for fentanyl breakdown products. However, this information was not included in the original autopsy report. The Court of Appeal ruled that Kristen's lawyer should have objected to the prosecution's claim that her husband died from a fentanyl overdose and should have tested the autopsy samples for substances that break down into fentanyl, instead of just accepting that as the cause of death. Although the conviction was not overturned, the case was sent back to the federal court to determine whether this mistake by the defense could have changed the trial's outcome. U.S. Supreme Court ruled federal courts must respect state court decisions, denying Kristen's appeal and keeping her in custody. Her trial named Michael Robertson, Kristen Rossum's former boss and lover, as co-defendant. Though he's lived freely in Australia since 2000, He could be arrested and bailed for $100,000 if he returns to the US. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kendra Hatcher. Kendra Hatcher was born on February 3, 1980 in Springfield, Sangamon County, Illinois, to Reagan Hatcher and Bonnie Gibson Jameson Colley. Her parents divorced, and her mother later married Bruce Jimon. She had 3 sisters, Jamie Coleman Ashel Lepum, Melissa Jameson, and a brother, Neil Hatcher. Kendra grew up in Pleasant Plains, where she studied dentistry. After getting divorced in 2010, she moved to Dallas and started working at Smile Zone, a dental studio. As a devout Christian, Kendra wanted to use her dental skills to help others, providing free services to disadvantaged children at the clinic. In her spare time, Kendra was involved in various activities, including teaching Bible studies and participating in volunteer programs. These programs involved building churches abroad and providing free dental services to children in Ecuador. After moving to Dallas, Kendra's professional career took off rapidly. Her personal life also began to blossom when she met Dr. Ricardo Palacios through a dating app on May 24, 2015. Kendra and Ricardo shared similar values, interests, and life goals. Ricardo was completing his dermatology residency at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. Despite having only been together for a few months, they were already discussing their upcoming marriage. A tragic incident in a parking lot took the life of Kendra, cutting short all their future plans. Upon arriving at the crime scene, investigators examined the evidence and initially suspected robbery as the motive, given that Kendra's purse and some valuables were missing. They found bullet fragments and a gun magazine near her body. However, the circumstances of the shooting and the bullet wounds suggested that robbery was not the primary motive. One bullet struck Kendra in the back, while the other hit her in the head. The entry wound was at the top of her head, and the bullet exited through her chin, indicating that she had her hands up and behind her head when she was shot. The murder theory was later confirmed when investigators obtained CCTV footage and reconstructed the events. The footage showed a black Jeep Grand Cherokee entering the parking lot at 7:15 p.m. 30 minutes later, Kendra returned home and parked in the same garage. Shortly after, a man approached her, shot her, and then ran to the side before jumping into the Jeep and driving off. Although the video quality was poor and the crime scene was not clearly visible, the authorities were unable to identify the assailant. However, they put the vehicle on a wanted list and appealed to the public for assistance. A man named Ortiz contacted the police after recognizing his car and footage related to the shooting. Ortiz claimed that, although the car belonged to him, he was not involved in the shooting and was not driving it at the time. He explained that, on the morning of September 2nd, he had lent his Jeep to 2 of his girlfriends, Brenda Delgado and Crystal Cortez, who asked to borrow it until the evening. Later that evening, Brenda called Ortiz to meet her at a restaurant where they were at the time of the crime. Meanwhile, Crystal Cortez drove the Jeep back to Ortiz's house. When Ortiz saw his Jeep on the TV news, he confronted Brenda, who initially denied that it was his Jeep, then admitted that Crystal had used it without his knowledge. Brenda tried to persuade Ortiz not to report the incident, offering to pay to have the Jeep repainted. At first, Ortiz was hesitant to get involved with the police, fearing it might jeopardize his pending U.S. citizenship. However, he eventually decided to cooperate and provided the police with the names of Brenda and Crystal. The police then tracked the movements of the Jeep on the day of the crime and located the 2 women. Brenda Delgado was the first to be questioned, but she claimed to have no knowledge of Kendra Hatcher and provided an alibi, stating she was at a restaurant with Ortiz at the time of the crime and produced receipts as proof. However, as the investigation continued, the truth slowly emerged, revealing the attempts by the perpetrators to conceal their involvement. Brenda Delgado came from a modest family. Her parents, Luis and Maria, immigrated to Dallas from Mexico, where her father worked in a factory. Brenda excelled academically and dreamed of attending medical school, but her parents couldn't afford the tuition. After high school, she continued to live with her parents, working as a dental assistant and at a spa, while still aspiring to a more affluent and beautiful life. Brenda balanced her dental assistant job with spa work, where she whitened her teeth. In 2012, she fell for Ricardo at a Jennifer Lopez concert. 3 months later, she moved in with him. Ricardo was smitten, meeting her parents, and Brenda gushed about her love in a Facebook birthday post. Brenda discovered she was pregnant, but Ricardo convinced her to have an abortion, leaving her devastated. After recovering from the ordeal, Brenda focused on her career and her beloved Ricky. She enrolled in Stanford that fall. Although it seemed like Brenda had moved on from the breakup, she was still hurting. Her obsession with Ricardo intensified, and when Ricky posted a photo with his new girlfriend, Kendra, a model-like beauty, Brenda was consumed by dark thoughts. Those close to her claimed she fantasized about harming Kendra. Investigators suspected Brenda had a strong motive to harm her rival. Ricardo confirmed that Brenda Delgado was his ex-girlfriend, and they had an on-again, off-again relationship from 2012 to 2015. They broke up a few months before Ricky met Kendra. Despite this, Ricardo believed he and Brenda remained friends and didn't think there was any bad blood between Brenda and Kendra. The reconstructed events revealed a disturbing picture of how manipulative and ruthless an abused woman can be. Brenda Delgado concocted a sinister plan to win back her former lover, Ricardo, and eliminate Kendra Hatcher, the woman he had moved on to. Initially, Brenda posed as Ricardo's supportive friend, pretending to take an interest in his relationship with Kendra. Unbeknownst to Ricardo, she gathered information about their future plans, which he naively believed was genuine concern. After Kendra's death, Ricardo confided in Brenda via text message, pouring out his grief. Brenda feigned sympathy, offering to help him in any way possible. Unaware of her true intentions, Ricardo trusted her completely. What he didn't know was that Brenda had been secretly manipulating him for months. She had been snooping on his mail, learning about his plans with Kendra, including their travel arrangements. This discovery fueled her anger, and she became fixated on eliminating Kendra, whom she believed had usurped her place in Ricardo's life. Brenda took control of Ricardo's phone account and used it to stalk him, keeping close tabs on his activities and those of his girlfriend Kendra. This obsession soon became her sole purpose in life. Brenda's fixation on stalking eventually led her to quit her job and dedicate all her time to achieving her twisted goals. Over time, she devised a cruel and terrifying plan to murder Kendra and take her place beside Ricardo. To put her plan into action, Brenda approached several acquaintances with an offer to harm Kendra in exchange for money. She eventually found a 21-year-old single mother, Crystal Cortez, who was struggling financially and willing to assist her. Crystal recruited a perpetrator, Christopher Love, who agreed to commit the crime. Brenda paid Crystal $500 and provided her with illegal substances, which Crystal then passed on to Christopher. Several women were tasked with following Kendra to learn her daily routines and identify the best location and time to carry out the crime. On September 2, 2015, they borrowed Jose's car. Crystal and Christopher lay in wait for Kendra in the parking lot, but lost their nerve and didn't follow her home from work due to fear of getting stuck in traffic. Later that evening, they finally carried out their sinister plan and were rewarded for their efforts. A few days after the crime, Crystal Cortez and Christopher Love were arrested. They both denied any involvement in the crime and claimed they were not at the scene. However, when the police found the murder weapon in the car, Love's story fell apart. Meanwhile, Crystal's alibi was inconsistent and confusing. At first, she claimed she was driving in the parking lot because an armed carjacker had taken over her SUV and forced her there. She even falsely stated that her young son was with her, but surveillance cameras showed no evidence of a child. As the investigation continued and more evidence emerged, Crystal changed her story again. this time offering to cooperate with the police in exchange for a reduced sentence. She implicated Brenda, claiming that she was the mastermind behind the crime and that they had been planning it for 2 weeks. According to Crystal, Brenda's obsession with winning back her ex-boyfriend, Ricardo, drove her to despise Kendra, whom she believed had taken her place. Brenda had pretended to be happy for Ricardo, but her life was actually unraveling. According to Crystal, Brenda decided to get rid of Kendra Hatcher at this point. In Crystal's testimony, she detailed how Brenda devised a plan to kill Kendra, enlisting her support. Brenda and Crystal started formulating a plan to kill Kendra, meeting several times and developing multiple plans. Initially, they planned to inject Kendra with illegal substances or sedatives and then dispose of her body. However, to avoid suspicion, Brenda needed a reliable enforcer and began looking for one. They drove around rough neighborhoods, asking people if they could help, which led them to Christopher Love, who agreed to help and participated in deciding the method of the crime. The three of them decided that shooting Kendra would be the quickest way to kill her. Crystal cooperated with authorities, revealing September 2nd wasn't a random choice. Brenda knew Kendra and Ricardo were going to Mexico, so they decided to kill Kendra before their trip. They wanted it to look like a botched robbery. Brenda and Crystal tracked Kendra's movements for days, noting her activities minute by minute. They traced her route home and entered the apartment complex's parking garage on September 1st, 2015, to set up the crime. Brenda and Crystal made a final check on the day of the crime. They picked up the Jeep and Christopher, dropping Brenda at the library to establish an alibi. Crystal and Christopher waited near Kendra's apartment, then followed her, losing her in traffic. They waited at her house, and when she arrived, Christopher shot her. Crystal claimed she didn't see it but heard the shot. She drove Christopher home, picked up her son, and returned the Jeep to Jose. Brenda's plan had finally come to fruition. She had eliminated her rival, and all she had to do was wait for a message from her beloved Ricardo. Brenda was thrilled to have committed the perfect crime. However, Crystal's subsequent confession and testimony against Brenda left no doubt about her guilt, and a warrant for her arrest was promptly issued. When the police arrived with the warrant, Brenda was no longer at home, having fled to Mexico using her dual citizenship. Brenda's involvement in a contract killing came to light after she fled, and on April 6, 2016, she was placed on the FBI's wanted list. With a $100,000 reward offered for information about her, she became the 9th woman to ever be listed among the most wanted fugitives, and the only woman on the list at the time. However, her freedom was short-lived, as she was apprehended just 2 days later in Torreon, Coahuila, by Mexican authorities, who extradited her to the United States on October 6, but only on the condition that she would not face the death penalty. Brenda was charged with capital murder in the U.S. At her 2017 Texas trial, relatives of Kendra and Ricardo spoke out. Witnesses testified, confirming Brenda's intentions and obsession with her ex. Her cousin Moses revealed Brenda's depression and her attempt to hire him to hurt Kendra. Brenda was obsessed with Ricardo, said friend Jennifer Escobar. Brenda read Ricardo's emails, tracked his movements, and had his house key and bank access. She asked Jennifer to kill or disable Kendra Hatcher, offering $2,000, a car, and drugs. Jennifer refused after consulting her parents. In court, multiple people who knew Brenda testified about her obsession, and it was established that Brenda had a motive to want Kendra dead. She viewed Kendra as an obstacle to getting what she wanted, specifically reuniting with Ricky. In the months leading up to Kendra's death, Brenda's obsession grew increasingly intense, as corroborated by evidence presented in court. This evidence included an ATM withdrawal receipt for $500, which Brenda later gave to Crystal as payment for her role, as well as a $600 cash payment received by Christopher Love. Furthermore, cell phone records revealed that Brenda, Crystal, and Christopher were together before the crime, with over 99 calls exchanged between Brenda and Crystal between August 22nd and September 4th. demonstrating their frequent communication to discuss the plan to kill Kendra Hatcher. Despite an alibi and receipts showing she was at a restaurant, the jury quickly found her guilty of Kendra Hatcher's murder. Delgado was sentenced to life without parole. Crystal Cortez, who cooperated with the investigation and pleaded guilty, received a 35-year prison sentence with parole eligibility. The Hatcher family expressed satisfaction with the court's decision and quietly left the courtroom following the verdict. On the other hand, the Delgado family, who knew Brenda as a loving daughter and woman with strong Christian values, refused to believe she was involved until the end. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Yvonne Baldelli. Yvonne Baldelli was born on June 30, 1969, in a small town in Southern California. She was the youngest of 3 children born to Marjorie and James Fold, with 2 older siblings, Michael and Michelle. Yvonne was especially close to her sister Michelle from a young age. Tragedy struck when Yvonne was 13, with the loss of her mother after a long illness. Her father James remarried a year later to Lillian, who turned out to be a kind and caring stepmother. Yvonne and her siblings developed a wonderful relationship with Lillian, who treated them as her own. Yvonne pursued a good education and experimented with various career paths, but her true passion lay in fashion design. She dreamed of turning her hobby into a successful business. However, her personal life was marked by misfortune. She had 2 failed marriages, the last one ending in divorce from Kevin Baldelli in 2007. Adding to her woes, Yvonne underwent surgery in her youth, which was followed by complications that left her unable to have children. After her second divorce, Yvonne lived a solitary life in her small apartment, where her only constant companion was her beloved dog, whom she lovingly referred to as her child. Despite her challenges, Yvonne remained close to her family, calling her father and sister daily and making it a point to visit them at least once a month. In 2009, as Yvonne was approaching her 40th birthday, she met Brian Brimmager, a married Marine with a young son. Despite being committed, Brian was open to an extramarital affair and confided in Yvonne about his unhappy marriage, stating that his only reason for not filing for divorce was the welfare of his child. Yvonne was taken by Brian's fit appearance and believed him. Having had a loveless marriage, she knew it was tough to leave, especially with kids. She didn't pressure him, thinking his child was the main issue. Little did she know, Brian was a charming liar, using his looks to juggle multiple relationships and fake promises. It became clear that Brimmager, who was married, was having an affair with not 1, but 2 women. One of them was Yvonne, and the other was Christine Verhoeven, a beautiful blonde with many influential contacts. Christine worked as an analyst at the White House. When Yvonne found out that her lover, Brian, was cheating on his wife with another woman, she decided to take action. Gathering her courage, she called Brian's wife to inform her that her husband was having an affair, not only with her, but also with another woman. This shocking news sparked a major scandal, forcing Brian to make a difficult decision. In the end, he chose Yvonne, although it's possible that she influenced his decision. A few months later, Brian officially divorced his wife and moved in with Yvonne. At the time, he was still serving in the Marines, but he had been thinking about ending his military career for a while. They seemed genuinely happy, but Yvonne's family remained skeptical of her new partner, questioning the sincerity of his feelings for her. In the summer of 2011, Brian started talking about making drastic changes to his life, including leaving the Marines, moving away from the city, and settling down on a tropical island. Yvonne shared his vision, supported him in everything, and was ready to follow him wherever he chose to go. She believed she had found the love of her life and adored him. By September, Yvonne decided to move to Panama's Carino Island, a tropical haven. Her dream was to open a boutique, creating custom outfits for tourists. In early September, Yvonne, Brian, and her dog flew to Panama, then took a ferry to Carino Island, renting an oceanfront house. The island's hot and humid climate attracted tourists, especially divers and surfers, year-round. Brian, a skilled guitar player since his teenage years, brought his instrument to the island with the intention of launching a music career, performing at various entertainment venues. Soon after settling in, he established connections with several local bar owners, and one of them offered him a gig. He would play in the evenings, entertaining the crowd, and as a token of appreciation, the audience would often buy him drinks, leading to a habit of heavy daily drinking. Yvonne's business, on the other hand, struggled to take off, with sluggish sales and meager profits. However, she persevered and found work at one of the bars. She also adopted a second dog, which she found on the island, and decided to keep. She maintained daily contact with her sister Michelle Valenzuela, sharing every detail, but her messages became increasingly brief and somber, causing concern among her family. Initially, the island seemed like a paradise to they. Yvonne had hoped that Brian would propose, and they would have a romantic beach wedding. However, as time passed, Brian showed no signs of rushing into marriage. Their relationship quickly began to deteriorate. In early December, Michelle became concerned when she stopped receiving messages from her sister Yvonne. Then, on December 14, 2011, Michelle received an unexpected call from Yvonne's boyfriend Brian. He asked when he could come by to pick up his SUV, which he had left in Michelle's garage before he and Yvonne had traveled to Panama. This call surprised Michelle because it meant Brian had returned to the US. But where was Yvonne? Why hadn't she come back or even reached out? Brian told Michelle that he had explained everything in an email he had sent a few days earlier. He also claimed that Yvonne had sent Michelle a message explaining the situation. Michelle checked her messages but found nothing. So, she turned to her email and discovered two unread messages, one from her sister Yvonne and one from Brian. Brian claimed in his message that Yvonne had left him for a new lover and moved to Costa Rica. However, a message supposedly from Yvonne stated that she had left him after discovering his infidelity and that another woman, Christine Verhoeven, had given birth to his child. This message also claimed that Yvonne had met someone new and gone to Costa Rica with him. It seemed believable at first, especially since Yvonne was unable to have children, and news of her partner's infidelity could have been devastating. However, Yvonne was not one to act impulsively, and it was unusual that she hadn't contacted her sister to discuss her situation. The tone of the message from Yvonne also raised suspicions as it didn't sound like her previous communications. Michelle suggested filing a missing persons report for Yvonne, but Brian was hesitant, claiming she was fine and capable of taking care of herself. He insisted she would come home on her own, but his nervousness and quick departure after picking up his vehicle raised suspicions. Shortly after, a message from Yvonne's phone arrived, stating she would return home in January for their father's birthday. This brought Michelle some relief, and she decided to wait, hoping Yvonne would come back as planned. By mid-January, Yvonne remained missing and hadn't reached out. Meanwhile, Michelle was stunned to learn that Brian had unexpectedly married Christine Verhoeven shortly before the new year began. What made this even more surprising was that he had only parted ways with his previous girlfriend a few weeks earlier. Michelle's concern for her sister's safety prompted her to report Yvonne missing to the police, as she suspected Yvonne hadn't actually gone to Costa Rica. An official inquiry to Panama confirmed her fears, verifying that Yvonne Baldelli had not left the country. Michelle's cousin, a programmer, helped trace the IP address of the emails supposedly sent by Yvonne from Costa Rica in December. The investigation revealed that the emails were actually sent from Dana Point, California, where Brian was located. The same IP address was used for an email sent by Brian himself. As the situation grew increasingly alarming, Michelle quickly informed the police of her discovery. Valenzuela then reached out to the FBI and the State Department, sharing her suspicions that Brian had harmed her sister in Panama, and continued to send messages from her phone and email, impersonating her for about a month. Although there wasn't enough concrete evidence to arrest Brian at the time, law enforcement interviewed him and continued gathering proof of his guilt. It was discovered that Brian had asked Christine to marry him while he was still in Panama with Yvonne, promising they would soon return and raise their daughter together. However, Christine was not aware that her child's father had gone to the island with another woman, as he had told her he was there on a business trip. 2 months after Yvonne's disappearance, her sister and niece conducted their own investigation and flew to Panama, where they sought the help of Don Winter, a former U.S. intelligence officer turned investigator who specialized in finding missing U.S. citizens. They shared the story of Yvonne's disappearance and the version of events Brian had given. After listening to them, Winter immediately expressed his concern that the chances of Yvonne being alive were low. With his extensive experience in such investigations and using his connections, Winter decided to pressure the Panamanian government and publicize the case, turning Yvonne's disappearance into international news. A press conference was also organized, which included Yvonne's family members. After arriving in Panama, Yvonne's father, stepmother, brother, and several other relatives and close friends joined the search for Brian Baldelli and assisted in the investigation. Together, they thoroughly searched the tropical island of Carino, but found no trace of him. The dense undergrowth and swampy marshes, which were home to a wide variety of wildlife, hindered their search efforts. The family also questioned the island's residents about their knowledge of Brian and Yvonne and what they could reveal about the couple's behavior. It became clear that Brian and Yvonne had been drinking excessively and frequently got into loud public arguments, disregarding those around them. Almost daily, they were seen in bars, drinking and arguing. Moreover, people began to notice bruises and scratches on Yvonne's face and body, and she rarely removed her sunglasses, seemingly to conceal the bruises under her eyes. The landlord of the house they rented confirmed that neighbors regularly complained about the noise, screams, and cursing coming from their residents. Meanwhile, FBI agents brought in a specialized team of divers to search the waters surrounding the island for potential evidence or remains of the missing woman. Unfortunately, these searches also yielded no results. From the start, Brian was the main suspect in the case, but there was no solid evidence to charge him with. He repeatedly denied any involvement, sticking to the same story that his ex-partner Yvonne had run off with another man. It wasn't until September 21, 2012, that Brian was finally questioned by the police and a search of his home was conducted. At that time, his wife Christine was at work and Brian was unemployed, staying at home to take care of their child and enjoying his favorite hobby, playing golf. Brian claimed Yvonne left him after discovering his child with another woman, but became anxious when police found Yvonne's laptop on his table. The laptop had messages sent after she supposedly left, including a photo of Yvonne with a bruise and a conversation between Brian and his mistress about their secret affair. The search history showed queries about cleaning bloodstains and removing blood from a mattress. These pieces of evidence were significant but circumstantial, as neither Aon's body nor a mattress with bloodstains was found. The fact that Brian had been sending messages pretending to be Aon didn't definitively prove his guilt. However, a discovery by Don Winter shed more light on the case. Before leaving Panama, Brimminger had sold a machete he owned to a buyer online. During their conversation, he jokingly said he had used the weapon once to finish off a stripper. Although the machete was seized for examination, it didn't initially yield any conclusive evidence. The long-awaited arrest was still pending. Meanwhile, the police had overlooked a crucial detail: Yvonne's bank card, which Brian used after her disappearance to make it seem like she was still alive. Before returning to the U.S., Brian went to Costa Rica and used the missing woman's card a few times, creating the illusion that she had fled there. He paid for his tickets in cash and withdrew money from different locations in San Jose, eventually draining the card before discarding it. However, Brian didn't realize that he was caught on surveillance cameras at the ATMs. In July 2013, a year and a half after the woman vanished, her relatives, armed with evidence collected by the police, FBI agents, and Don Winter, finally succeeded in getting Brian arrested. At first, he was held on charges of lying and obstructing the investigation, as there wasn't enough evidence to charge him with anything more serious at that time. By then, Christine had given birth to a second son just a week before his arrest, making Brian a father for the second time. The authorities tried to have an open conversation with the suspect, offering him the opportunity to admit to the crime and reveal the location of Yvonne's body. However, Brian consistently denied any involvement. His lawyer also claimed that since there was no body or direct evidence linking Brian to Yvonne's disappearance, there was no proof of his guilt. In the swamp on the island of Quinero, a worker stumbled upon a gruesome discovery just 2 months after Brian's arrest. While taking a shortcut through the underbrush, the worker spotted an army backpack partially submerged in the water. Curious about what might be inside, the worker opened the bag, only to be met with horror at the sight of a human skull. The worker immediately notified the police, who responded and took the backpack into custody for further examination. Inside, they found fragments of a human body, as well as the remains of 2 small dogs. The remains had been deliberately dismembered, placed in the bag, and discarded in a remote area, likely intended to never be found. DNA testing later confirmed that the human remains belonged to Yvonne. However, many of her limbs were missing. Further examination by pathologists revealed that Yvonne had suffered a brutal beating before her death, including a broken nose, cheekbone, and several missing teeth. When the unique chop marks on the victim's bones were matched to the machete's blade, it confirmed that the body had been dismembered with this weapon, as each blade has a distinct signature, similar to human fingerprints. With this evidence, Brian was formally charged with murder, dismemberment, and concealing a crime. In 2014, Michelle Valenzuela got a cancer diagnosis, and after 6 months of intense treatment, realized it was futile. She dedicated her last months to seeking justice for her sister, testifying against Brian and submitting evidence to the court despite her weakening health. Brian assaulted Yvonne in a drunken rage after she discovered his affair, stabbing her to death. He then dismembered her body, killing her dogs, and hid the parts in a backpack in a swamp. Brian fabricated a story about Yvonne leaving him, gaining sympathy from locals, and even found a new girlfriend. However, during the trial, his girlfriend testified against him, and he was forced to admit his guilt, claiming self-defense despite evidence showing he was fully aware of his actions. In the spring of 2016, Brian was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 26 years in prison, with eligibility for parole in 2035. At sentencing, credit was given for his prior service in the Marines, which spared him from a life sentence. Meanwhile, Brian's wife, Christine Verhoeven, maintained her husband's innocence and pledged to stand by him no matter what. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samadi Fonseca Fernandez. Samadi was born in Costa Rica in February 1975. Her family and early life are not well documented. She spent her childhood in an area called Cuba, where she lived with her mother, Sonia Fonseca. Samadi attended a local school, where she demonstrated a challenging and conflicted personality from an early age. She had difficulty accepting rejection and often used force or deception to get what she wanted. People who knew her recall that Samadi's striking appearance and perfect figure made it easy for her to charm men, but she struggled to maintain relationships. Her beauty and charisma were matched by her greed and vanity, which led her to prioritize material wealth and self-interest above all else. This attitude often discouraged potential partners. Additionally, Samadi became intensely jealous and aggressive after brief relationships. Samadi's doll-like appearance led to her working as a Barbie lookalike at a large Universal bookstore for several years. This earned her a flattering nickname that stuck with her throughout her life. After high school, Samadi had in love with a successful local TV journalist named Osvaldo Fernando Ballery, who was 16 years her senior. Samadi had a long and serious relationship with Osvaldo, with whom she had 2 children, Christopher and Christina. However, due to constant scandals and jealousy, they separated in 2012. After Osvaldo's sudden death, it was discovered that he had not included Samadi in his will. Samadi took matters into her own hands and seized Osvaldo's house, changing the locks to prevent his relatives and heirs from entering. She also took some valuable items that belonged to Osvaldo. His family members were outraged and went to court to accuse Samadi of theft. The police eventually forced Samadi to leave the house, but she was not charged with a crime. Samadi had other relationships, including one with Miguel Angel Perez, with whom she had a daughter named Maria. This relationship was reportedly official, but ended in divorce after a few years. Samadi allegedly gave her youngest daughter her lover's surname without his knowledge or consent, contradicting claims that she was unmarried at the time. Interestingly, some of her lovers have mysteriously disappeared or died under unclear circumstances, yet this trend went unnoticed for a long time. For instance, one of Samadi's lovers went missing shortly after deciding to end their relationship with the reportedly temperamental and aggressive woman. Despite relative suspicions of her involvement, his disappearance remains unsolved due to lack of concrete evidence. Another former lover, Diaco, met a tragic end after breaking up with Samadi. His murder was initially attributed to a botched robbery, but the perpetrators were never caught. Speculations about Samadi's role in the crime persisted, albeit without solid proof. Her most notable alleged victim was Gerardo Cruz, a Costa Rican native born in December 1992 in San Jose. Gerardo never knew his biological father, who left the family before his birth. His mother, Ana Patricia, later married Hermes Rodriguez, who adopted and raised Gerardo as his own. Gerardo's younger sister, Milena, was born a few years after him. He had a peaceful and carefree childhood and youth. Gerardo attended a regular school, enjoyed motorcycles, and met his true love, Carol, at a young age. By 23, he, Carol, and their 4-year-old daughter Genesis moved into his aunt and uncle's house in San Sebastian, a suburb of the city. Gerardo took a job at a local bakery to support his family. They were happy, especially with the news of a second child on the way. In the summer of 2015, Gerardo met Samadi, a 40-year-old woman who regularly visited the bakery. She was attractive, fashionably dressed, and flirtatious. As Samadi aged, she began to have relationships with younger men, likely flattered by their attention. Despite their nearly 20-year age difference, Gerardo became infatuated with Samadi and started secretly meeting with her. She visited the bakery almost daily, catching the attention of other employees. Samadi often brought her 19-year-old daughter, Christina, to the bakery. Initially, Gerardo balanced his family life and secret meetings with Samadi without either woman knowing about the other. However, Gerardo soon let his guard down, boasting to friends and colleagues about his relationship with Samadi, describing her as a terrific mistress who spoiled him with gifts. Rumors about Gerardo's affair soon reached his mother, who attempted to persuade him to end the relationship. The affair was short-lived, ending in October 2015, when Samadi discovered that his mistress, Gerardo, was married with a pregnant wife and a young daughter. Upon learning this, Samadi became enraged. She began harassing Carol, Gerardo's wife, with threatening calls and messages, warning her that Gerardo would be harmed if he didn't return to her exclusively. Gerardo apologized to his wife and reconciled, keeping their family intact. He underestimated Samadi's malice, thinking she would move on and calm down after the breakup. However, Samadi's vindictiveness was more intense than Gerardo anticipated. Shortly after the breakup, Gerardo witnessed a disturbing incident. While walking downtown, Gerardo noticed an older man secretly filming under a young girl's mini-skirt with his phone. Outraged, Gerardo took out his phone to record the scene. He then approached she, told her what was happening, and advised her to report the incident to the police. Gerardo chased the man for about 2 minutes, trying to get a clear shot of his face on camera. During the chase, Gerardo asked loudly if the man was enjoying taking photos of his sister's underwear without their consent. The man eventually jumped into a taxi and escaped. That night, Gerardo posted the video on his social media page, and it quickly went viral. Internet users identified the man as Luis Solmano Delgado, a former Ministry of Finance employee. As a result, Gerardo became a national celebrity, giving daily interviews to newspapers and appearing on TV and radio shows. He condemned Delgado's actions and stated that he had no regrets about exposing him. However, Delgado's lawyers began working against Gerardo, accusing him of violating the law by distributing the video. They prepared a lawsuit against him, which left Gerardo surprised and confused. He couldn't understand why he was being judged for exposing his actions, rather than the man being held accountable for his behavior. Gerardo's last interview was on October 7th at a local radio station. Feeling confident and believing he had nothing to hide, he spoke openly. The following day, Gerardo had plans to meet his friend Oswald after work, but he suddenly canceled, citing an unexpected emergency. It was later revealed that he had received a message from Samadi, luring him to the park that evening under the pretext of another interview. Gerardo had no reason to suspect anything was amiss and trusted his former lover. After finishing work, he went to the agreed meeting point, but instead of journalists, 2 unknown men were waiting. They took his bag, assaulted him, stabbed him multiple times in the chest and stomach, and then fled. Before losing consciousness, Gerardo managed to call a friend and report the incident. The friend immediately alerted the police and medical services. Thanks to the swift response, Gerardo was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save his life for 42 days. He underwent numerous operations, but unfortunately, they were unable to save him. Gerardo passed away on November 19th in the intensive care unit. Initially, multiple theories emerged about the crime. The first theory suggested it was a robbery murder. Gerardo was indeed attacked in a park at night, his bag was stolen, and he was stabbed with a knife, which made it appear to be a typical theft. However, just a few days before, Gerardo had released a sensational video that compromised a well-known former government official, leading to a second theory, that the murder was an act of revenge. The media openly speculated that the former government official may have hired hitmen to kill the young man who had damaged his reputation. The murder sparked intense debate in the press, with protesters demanding that the perpetrators be caught and brought to justice. The police explored various theories, searching for other potential enemies of Gerardo. For months, the investigation stalled. However, in May 2016, a breakthrough came when footage from a street surveillance camera was discovered. The video showed 2 men fleeing the scene where Gerardo was fatally attacked. These individuals immediately became the prime suspects, and the police worked to identify and apprehend them. The footage proved to be crucial evidence, and once it was made public, the case started to move forward. It was repeatedly shown on news programs, with viewers asked to take a close look as the individuals could be dangerous. Police created rough sketches of the suspects and described their physical characteristics. One of the suspects soon came forward, hoping that cooperating with the investigation would lead to a reduced sentence. The information provided by the cooperating suspect led investigators to several accomplices and the crime's organizers, Samadi and her daughter Christina. All individuals involved in the crime were eventually taken into custody. Those arrested included Ronald Archie, a cab driver who helped locate the perpetrators, Cesar Chavez, a laborer who acted as an intermediary, and Omar Costa, a young minor who directly participated in the attack and had been tracking the victim on the day of the incident. The investigation revealed the roles and connections of all parties involved through phone records and text messages. Samadhi, who had meticulously planned the crime, had enlisted the help of her daughter Christina. Together, they recruited friends Ronald and Caesar to find hitmen to kill Gerardo, staging it to look like a botched robbery in a nighttime park. They were later joined by Omar, who was responsible for ensuring the victim went to the prearranged location. Samadhi personally chose October 7th as the date for the massacre. On that day, she was in frequent contact with all parties involved, assigning roles and verifying that everyone adhered to the plan. Gerardo was attacked, stabbed multiple times, and robbed of his bag and jacket. These stolen items were later given to the police as evidence. The primary evidence against Samadhi was a series of text messages detailing the murder plan and each participant's role. Samadhi was so confident she wouldn't get caught that she didn't bother deleting the incriminating messages. Her motive for the crime was jealousy. She didn't want to share her lover with his wife. If she couldn't have him, no one would. She carefully planned the crime, involving her own daughter, who assisted her throughout. Samadhi and her daughter were immediately arrested, with no possibility of bail due to the risk of them fleeing the country. Their accomplices were also detained, except for Omar, the youngest participant, who was handed over to juvenile authorities. The investigation spanned a year and a half, concluding in December 2017 when the trial of all parties involved in the criminal conspiracy commenced. It was revealed that Samadhi had a history of run-ins with the law, including a prior arrest for forging documents to obtain state benefits, for which she received only a fine. New information also emerged about Miguel Angel Perez, ex-husband of Samadhi. It was discovered that Samadhi had given their child Perez's surname without his consent. She then successfully petitioned the court to order him to pay child support, which he did for over 3 years. However, it was later uncovered that the entire process had been fraudulent. As a result, Samadhi was sentenced to 3 years in prison and a substantial fine. During the trial, Gerardo's wife testified that she had been aware of his affair with Samadhi. She stated that Samadhi had threatened Gerardo with death, but he had not taken these threats seriously. The primary motive behind the crime, as previously stated, was Samadhi's jealousy and wounded pride, stemming from her inability to accept that her younger lover had chosen to remain with his wife. Thanks to phone records, it was discovered that the mother and daughter had planned the crime together. Additionally, after the release of the CCTV footage showing the killers, Christine had a nervous breakdown. She called her mother, sobbing, and was close to going to the police to confess. However, her mother calmed her down, assuring her that the investigation would not lead to them. The verdict was announced on January 23, 2018. According to the court's decision, Samadhi was sentenced to 30 years in prison, while Christina, Ronald, and Caesar each received 25-year prison sentences. One of the killers was sent to a juvenile detention center, and the other had not been found at the time. Omar, who had been stalking the victim, was acquitted. The victim's family was awarded $140,000 in compensation for their loss. After the verdict, the family expressed gratitude to the court for the fair punishment of Gerardo's killers. However, it soon became known that Samadhi and Christina's lawyers had filed an appeal to reduce their sentences. As a result, each participant's sentence was reduced by 5 years. Samadhi is currently serving her 25-year sentence in a Costa Rican women's prison,